Hello, can you hear me?
Yo,
Hi.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I
Oh,
can hear you.
God.
What's up?
Cool. Not much. How's it going?
Communism.
Good. Here, let me switch the OBS virtual cam so my Zoom doesn't explode.
Communism is happening.
Click this button. And nice. How's your day going?
Comrade.
Oh, pretty good. How about you?
Oh, pretty all right. Mostly been blasting Tears of the Kingdom. Lots of.
Oh, this is the person. Oh, I know of this debate. Oh, this is going to be a doozy. By the way, I've noticed a trend of the biggest lovers, the biggest fans of Marxism, Leninism being people that have never experienced it, whose parents have never experienced it. In other words, people coming from countries that never actually had Marxism, Leninism, you know? Pretty interesting, pretty telling that, to me at least, you know? That people that love Marxism, Leninist the most are the people that had the least to do with it ever, you know? Pretty telling, in my personal opinion.
Of furry goat characters in there for me to enjoy the company of. So that's been fun. Totally at the detriment to my content, though. The viewers are begging for more videos, but I tell them, I've gotta play the Zelda game. It's a lot of fun. I didn't play the last one.
Oh,
For sure. You need that.
I should play the last
that
one.
Relaxation time.
It is a very relaxing game. So, what's your for the
Content.
fine people in my audience? What's your name and what pronouns do you go by?
My name's Eddie Liger Smith. That's what I've been going by online for the past few years, and
Great.
part of the MidwesternMarx Institute. And then him. So
Yeah, I didn't realize it was a collective thing. It took me a second. I thought I didn't. I was conflating a couple of things, but that's great. Right? Collective's a fundamental principle of anarchic governmental organization.
Well, Marxism, Leninism, unfortunately, sort of undermines the baseness of this whole thing. So, well, I guess not all collectives are equal in their baseness. Oh no, this guy. Which guy? You know this guy? You know this person, Somiostatic? How do you know this person? Tell us the lore. Tell us the backstory. Tell us everything. Tell us everything, Somiostatic. Now you have no choice. You don't have a choice anymore. Now you have to tell us everything. This is the guy that said the reason Tucker Carlson got fired was because he spoke the truth about the Russia. Oh no. Oh God. Okay. Jesus. Of course it is.
you bet. Or communistic governmental organization, I would say, or party organization. But
Marxist
kind of
Leninist.
blew up on TikTok, or I blew up on TikTok, so a lot of people associate the institute with me. But yeah, we got a handful of good people working with us.
It's the price of fame. I'm glad that it's going well. Maybe.
Maybe.
So yeah, what did you want to talk about?
Well said. Maybe. Maybe you'll not be so glad soon enough. My gosh. I'm really glad you've added the qualifier of maybe. I am glad you've added that. Vaush made fun of that guy really hard like last week. Well, I'm glad.
Dang.
Maybe.
I think we had some disagreements over who provoked the current conflict in Ukraine.
Whoa.
As I understand it, you side with Ukraine.
Provoked. Oh, yeah. Ukraine provoked being invaded. How do you... Oh, God. People are so stupid.
Ukraine, which I would conflate with siding with
NATO. Oh my gosh, NPCs. They are all NPCs. NATO. Oh my god.
Position is that the war was provoked by NATO and Western aggression and the 2014 coup. And I think you would have some.
Because everybody knows that the lesser countries have no say in anything. You know, the lesser countries are just pawns in the game of the real countries, you know, real countries that actually exist, like the US or Russia. All the other countries are just, you know, pawns. Russia, you know, Ukraine doesn't really have any agency or, you know, will of its own. It's all just NATO, Russia, and stuff like that, right? Of course. Of course, of course.
Areas of disagreement there.
It's kind of a concession on your part even to admit that, right? Because if one side provoked it, that means the other side started it, right? Like if you say one person provoked a fight, what that means is they said something or did something that led the other person then to start a fight. So even in your framing, you would have to acknowledge that it's a war started by Russia.
I mean, the
Uh-oh.
intervention itself, I consider more of an escalation than a start to.
Intervention. TikTok Marxist Leninists, I swear, man. Intervention. Someone should do an intervention on you, I swear. Ukraine was asking for it, should have dressed more appropriately. I mean, that is basically what I hear when I listen to arguments like this.
War. I think the war started in 2014 with the U.S. coup, which then provoked the later.
The US coup. See? They are just NPCs, and it's exactly how I frame it. The lesser countries don't have any say. It's all about the big players. It's all about the big players and their pawns. The US, Russia, and then you have pawns like Ukraine, pawns like Poland, pawns like, yeah, pawns. You're all pawns. Of course. Do you see how ridiculous this actually is? I hope you can see how ridiculous this actually is, right? You know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to say? How disrespectful this is, how like condescending this is to a country that to basically say that they are like meaningless, that the only countries that matter are the big players.
Escalation by Russia as they got fully involved and launched the special military operation.
These provocations keep going back and forth, it seems. I hope one day these two people can live in peace.
Definitely.
So,
Definitely.
yeah, seems like a kind of an uphill start for you, given the whole Russia started the war thing. But if you say that it's a continuation of a previously existing conflict, I think I agree with that. I think that's a fair framing to say the war started in 2014. So then I would just go to say, well, you know, Russia started the conflict back in 2014
True.
by annexing Crimea and providing soldiers and martial arms
True.
to separatist groups in the Donbass,
True.
which is a pretty literal example of a proxy war. Considering the fact that Ukraine hadn't, you know, invaded Russia prior or prompted any instigatory secessionist action in Russia, it seems pretty difficult to argue Russia didn't start that too.
Yeah.
I mean, Russia was supporting what has been called in the Western media separatist movements in the Donbass.
Lol.
After years and years of provocations from the West. I mean, the West has been promoting neo-Nazism and ethno-nationalism.
There you go. Ukraine doesn't matter. What matters is, once again, the West. Ukraine never matters in those calculations.
Ukraine since the end.
Ukraine never factors in as an autonomous country with agency.
World War II. I mean, so you could consider that a provocation of Russia. And there's even videos of Joe Biden himself saying that we cannot expand NATO eastward because it would provoke Russia and it would lead to a conflict between Russia and the U.S. or Russia and Ukraine. Yet the U.S. continued to do that. They were training up NATO troops on Russia's border, although they weren't actually adding Ukraine to NATO. They continually floated the idea and were training.
Floated the idea.
Interoperable, among all sorts of other regime change efforts or infiltration efforts in Ukraine, which everybody knows is just a swarm of U.S. NGOs, and it's been that way for a very long time.
So
Everybody
what's the
knows.
state, if anything.
I would say that the NATO project in Ukraine has always been to support ethno-nationalism, knowing that that's a way to provoke and attack Russia. And I mean, that was proven by Angela Merkel saying
hold
that
your horses. You brought up hold your horses.
Well, let me finish my point.
You brought up like 4 points so far, so we got to go one at a time.
No,
right?
I'm bringing up the point of Western interventionism in Ukraine that
Are you
provoked
starting
this
to bring up a
conflict.
new
You
point?
said that Russia was backing separatists in the Donbass region. That was in response to all of this aggression from the U.S., which Angela Merkel admitted in 2014. The U.S. never had any intentions to sign a peace agreement. Their whole goal was to build up
We're not
military
at war with anyone
presence
there.
in Ukraine so that they could eventually launch an attack against Russia.
Okay,
What Russia
all right, well, hold it.
writing
Okay,
on the wall
listen,
and got involved. Before.
My gosh.
I'm excited to talk about this too, but my God, you know, I'm getting
Just rapid firing lies, my goodness. It's called Gish Galloping, if I remember
I
correctly.
can't remember these points if you insecurely list 7 at a time. If you trust your points, you have to go one by one, because otherwise it makes me think you want to run away from them. Now, what's interesting to me is we were talking about provocation, and then you went on this whole jibber jabber rant about
True.
ethno-nationalism and right. So,
and the evidence of
all of this framing established, we must acknowledge then what you're describing, if you get down to it, is kind of like a copy collection of excuses for Russia to start the war.
True.
Now, if you want, we can talk about the nature of these so-called provocations. I'm totally fine with that. But even in the framing you're presenting, I came here neutral, you know, but you're moving me over to the position that it must have been Russia who started the conflict.
True.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be framing all of these as provocations to justify them doing so. You would be
How are they
talking
not
about times... No, see, you don't understand.
How are they not provocations when Angela Merkel literally admitted that the whole goal of what the U.S. and NATO...
My God, this person is so... This is U.S. Marxist land, U.S. tankies. Love it. Just love it.
...doing in Ukraine was to attack Russia.
TikToker.
You're still not understanding. It's okay. I can repeat that part. You keep talking about provocation.
Why do people like this explode? Why do people like this explode on social media? For God's sake. I deserve more. I deserve more subs, okay? In this. At least I don't go on camera and start saying complete BS.
Every time you say they provoke this, they provoke that, what you're saying is they provoked Russia into starting the war. Right? That's what provocation means. We're not talking about times Ukraine started the war.
Because you're ignoring what I said. They provoked Russia to escalate the war in 2022. The war itself began in 2014 when...
Are they trying... Is he trying to say that in 2014 Ukraine started the war?
Allowed a very anti-Russian government to come to power when these U.S.-backed ethno-nationalist groups like...
An anti-Russian government getting into power in a separate country means that it's free carte blanche for invasion. See, I told you in these conversations, Ukraine's autonomy never matters. Ukraine's autonomy never matters in those discussions. You know, because Ukraine is just a pawn for the UN, for the US, of course, you know? None of them matter. They don't have...
C-14, the Azov battalion, escalated the Maidan protests into an actual violent overthrow.
Oh, yeah.
That allowed for these
Azov
militaries to gain a real foothold and begin shelling the homes of civilians in the Donbass,
So
killing
jibber jabber.
14,000 people
You
in
have to-
total and 5,000 civilians in
It
the Donbass
speaks. It
specifically.
speaks to your
who
lack of
requested
confidence
that
in these
Russia
points
get
that you feel
involved.
the need to run off with them. I asked you
I think
specifically.
it speaks to
You're
your lack of an
already
argument
getting
that you
upset.
have to continue interrupting me when I'm laying out what happened.
Ed, listen, okay, there's laying out, all right, and then there's a 40-year land making project, all right? You need to slow down. We'll get to all these points. It's okay. I'm happy to be talking to you too. But you don't need to script.
True.
I asked you specifically when you think the war began. So I'm saying that Russia started the war. You keep talking about
National sovereignty? Never heard of it. Well, apparently this person has never... Ed has never heard of it either.
led to
Okay.
Russia started
So
the
we
war.
want to focus on when
Okay.
the war began.
Yeah, when
I would
who
say
started
in
the war?
2014, the war in the Donbass started. And I would say who started the war? I mean, it was a combination of
So the NATO started the war by what being bad, and the U.S. and they used the Azov battalion to escalate, and Russia had no choice. This is what he's gonna say. This is the extent of what he's gonna say.
the ethno-nationalist neo-Nazi forces.
True,
in the
true.
Right sector, the paramilitary arm of Right
True.
sector, Azov battalion, and C-14.
Oh
were
yeah,
being propped up, funded, and
by NATO.
by the den of
So
U.S.
what
NGOs
happened
that's existed in Ukraine for
that
a long
started
time.
the war?
The coup that allowed for ethno-nationalists and militias and right-wing paramilitary.
You can
to
answer
essentially-
without
let
the
me finish,
addendum.
Let me finish.
Well, but
asked me a
will you
question, let me
repeat it
finish.
every time?
That
Because I
allowed
want to
them
get
to
through to this.
essentially
We're going to
act
take
with
forever at this
impunity.
rate.
That it's if you continue to ask me questions and then interrupt me when I try and answer, it will take a long time.
If I ask you,
That-
if
so
I
the
tell
coup
you
in
that I need to go to the
2014
bathroom at some point, will you tell
essentially
me
allowed
that?
these
Yeah, in addition to
ethno-nationalists to start acting with impunity, start shelling the homes of civilians in the Donbass, and that's what started essentially a civil war in Ukraine.
You already
which Russia
named
escalated and intervened
A civil war in Ukraine. Hmm.
in 2020.
You already named like several things. So I asked you when the war started, and then you did
and
the
I
script
said
read
2014
again.
with
So-
the coup.
Right, 2014 with the coup. So did the coup? So when Yanukovych fled, that was the beginning of a declaration of war. I want a like specific answer. Wars are big deals, you know. Wars aren't like
Right.
nebulous. It's not like a TikTok beef or whatever you guys do. Social media,
TikTok
clout
beef.
influencer. Wars are like big things. They're usually like Fort Sumter with the U.S. Civil War, for example. If I asked a person, when did the Civil War begin? And they were like, well, it began when Lincoln violated the rights of the southern states by refusing to acknowledge
True.
the Dred Scots. It's well, okay, well, all right. Now, but when did the war begin? I ask you.
I would say when right sector took over or took hold of most of the government buildings, and their leader said that we are not going to hand over these buildings until Yanukovych is dismissed as president. Those are our demands. And at that point, Yanukovych fled, and the paramilitaries were able to essentially act with impunity and start shelling the homes of civilians. And
Yeah, for sure.
Wait, hold on.
and that's the war.
Wait, hold on. The coup.
It's civilians in eastern Ukraine versus
What-
the
Euro
Ukrainian
wait,
government.
The way you're making it sound, it's
Wow.
like the guys in the Euromaidan, like they left the Capitol building and then walked 1,000 miles east with artillery pieces and started shelling like orphanages. You keep blurring things. When did the war start? Was it when they entered the Capitol building? Because hey, listen, I love me some anti-Republican hysteria, but I don't think January 6th was a war. You know, it was an attempt at an insurrection.
I DM'd you the timestamp of you making fun of MidwesternMarx. Let me see. We're gonna take a look at this real quick. Jesus, this person is such an NPC.
I forget what his name is. He said he didn't want to debate because he's a pussy or something. I don't know. But a video of his got posted by MidwesternMarx, who's like a 14-year-old Stalinist or something. And
Oh,
it's
guy.
like, look at this.
The war in Ukraine. If you want to understand the war in Ukraine, put
Edward Mugler or something.
yourself in the shoes of somebody.
Wait.
I saw this.
Wait. This guy is MidwesternMarx?
Oh God, I saw this TikTok. It's so horrible.
Same person? Oh, Oh no! He's retarded. Oh, I didn't realize he was that bad. I thought he was just Oh.
Oh. What do you know?
Is this guy like 15? I thought MidwesternMarx was 15, but the Edward M. Liger guy,
Liker.
you know, I think he's in college or something.
Oh.
Like Shaggy. I don't know.
Oh, she does. She does.
Oh, man.
Shaggy.
That's really embarrassing. Well, I guess I'll watch the clip now.
Chili D. Hey, listen, did you see the Vaush versus KT debate? It was crazy. What was it about?
Now I just feel kind of bad.
Do
Everybody
you?
living in the Donbass region. This is a place in eastern Ukraine containing cities like Donetsk and Lugansk, where most of the civilians are ethnic Russians who speak the Russian language. And in 2010, they voted for Viktor Yanukovych as president because he promised to bring peace between Russians and Ukrainians. But in the lead up to 2014,
In 2010, I'm pretty sure there was...
Peace between Russia and... So that's pretty ridiculous.
pulled millions of dollars into Ukraine in order to foment a coup and overthrow that government.
That's not true. Factually
not.
incorrect.
It is
Yanukovych was a
incorrect.
puppet of Putin, directly took orders from Putin.
True.
And when he made the incredibly unpopular deal to ignore the will of the people and side entirely with Russia in an economic trade deal, as opposed to the EU,
True.
which the people wanted, the people protested.
People wanted to join the EU.
Turn Ukraine into a dictatorship at the behest of Putin. The laws that he was attempting to pass would have given him essentially total dictatorial control over Ukraine. He was protested against, and he eventually fled the country.
True.
There is no evidence that it
All
was
of
an
this is true.
American-backed coup any more than American officials supported the protesters. As in, like, yeah, you go fight for democracy. Which, if that makes it a coup, then, you know, okay. Well, all right then.
True.
Didn't he also gun down protesters? Yes, he did. You're correct.
Of
He had
course.
snipers at the
That is what
at the behest of
dictators
Putin,
do.
To whom he was a puppet. He had snipers shoot protesters. That's true.
Wow, he did the same thing as in Belarus. What do you know?
And at this point, literal far-right extremist ethno-nationalist groups like the Azov Battalion started getting added to the actual Ukrainian
Oh,
military.
God.
And they started
No, that didn't happen until later. The Azov Battalion was a local ultranationalist militia that formed because Russia invaded the Donbass in 2014, and Ukraine basically didn't have a military. So there were a bunch of like loose, like regionalist paramilitaries that coalesced in order to defend from the Russian-backed invasion. Yeah, eventually Ukraine would go on to nationalize all of these militias, not just the Azov Battalion. The Azov Battalion is one of literally hundreds of militias. But it had nothing to do with, like, deliberately taking
Oh my God.
Azov.
Tankies.
Why does it censor Scooby? Why does it censor Scooby?
Scooby snacks.
On top of that, he's failing to note the small detail that Russia invaded. Yeah, very curious that this guy, who's just honestly representing the facts of what happened in
True.
Ukraine, not including the whole Russian invasion in 2014. Is he even going to mention the annexation of Crimea?
Nope.
waging war against the ethnic Russians.
No,
No.
I don't think he is. This is the Russian line.
True.
Russia invades the Donbass and supports the separatists there. And Ukrainians defending their territory are framed as warring against ethnic Russians, which is, of
True.
course, incoherent and factually incorrect. I really wish this guy wasn't such a pussy. He's backed... he hasn't backed out of debating because he never said that he would. But I feel like I remember him having to defend his unwillingness to debate me. You know, because there were people in his community who wanted him to as well, so he could epically own me. I didn't realize he was the MidwesternMarx guy. That's really embarrassing.
Oh,
The
God.
MidwesternMarx guy, I just remember posting, like, incomprehensibly retarded shit so often. And, like, getting ratioed and made fun of and everything.
Oh, no. Aw.
Watches Moppin. He's not smarter than him.
Oh,
including firing artillery shells at their homes. In all, 14,000 people were killed before Russia even got involved. That is the humanitarian.
That's just factually incorrect. Also, by Russia getting involved, what he means is Russian troops directly moving into the Donbass as opposed to simply supplying money and armaments to the separatists that they funded, prompted, organized, supplied, and gave intel to in the Donbass. So it's a lie, but he's also laundering like the actual invasion part of the lie. Not mentioning Crimea either, curiously.
Crisis that the U.S. created in Ukraine, and that's why Russia eventually invaded.
I lost because I was supposed to not destroy this tower. Yeah, I just remembered that I destroyed the one building that I was supposed to leave and not destroy.
Donbass actually requested Russia to invade 10 times before they did. War is terrible, but remember.
Yes, the Russian-backed separate
War is terrible, but not when
NATO started this war.
Of course.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, this guy is like primo retarded, but I don't think he'll debate me.
Okay, we're returning to the debate now.
You think it was a war when they,
Good to know.
they protested to get Yanukovych out?
I would say it was a war when they started taking military actions against like Lugansk, Donetsk, these places in the Donbass.
So it
where,
wasn't actually
14,000 people were killed.
So it wasn't actually the Yanukovych bit. That's just like the predecessor to this. What we're really talking
Yes,
about
that
is
was
the
the
conflict in
pretext
the
that
Donbass.
allowed for it to happen. But that, as you said, wars are very serious things. So it's important to understand not just when they started or you know who provoked them, but also the pretext that allowed them to happen. And the pretext of this war is a U.S.-backed coup that would have been impossible.
Oh, yeah.
For NGOs backing these groups
And
like Right Sector,
Joe Biden
who
and such,
first
right.
took power of the government and then waged the war against the people of the Donbass.
So I'm
yeah.
still really confused. So you say the war began when the Right Sector marched over 1,000 miles east with artillery pieces. That's fine. That can happen. But
I mean, Right Sector
they just
spread
did
out.
that
The
unprompted?
100% of the Right Sector troops weren't in Maidan. Right.
kind of
They
blurring
seized
it all
power of
together.
the government, consolidated power.
Mhm.
Not necessarily the neo-Nazis, but like I said,
You know, that is like that is a staple of people that don't know what they're talking about. When you start blurring everything together, it usually means that you have no clue what you're talking about.
they consolidated power and that they were essentially able to act with impunity after the coup.
Oh yeah.
And then, yes, they marched east and began their offensive against civilians in the Donbass.
Oh yeah, their biggest
Russia
enemies.
did then start supporting.
Oh, what date
Right.
did that happen? The attacks in the civilian population, out of curiosity.
It began in 2014 and it's lasted through today.
Well, I know it's
Oh,
happened
yeah.
in 2014. I'm asking you when the date was, because that just seems odd. So they're far-right people. Now, I admit far-right people are pretty evil. I wouldn't put it past them to do all sorts of bad stuff. But they just, to celebrate ousting Yanukovych, they just start shelling civilian buildings. That's an odd... Why would they...
Do that.
Is there a disagreement? What happened?
That's the ethno-nationalist ideology. That's
Ah.
the neo-fascist ideology that the U.S. That's the Banderite ideology. I say the U.S. has backed this ideology since World War II, but even before that, during the World War, they were, more so Britain than the U.S. were.
Even before the Second World War, during like the First World War. What are you talk? What? I'm sorry.
Backing Stepan Bandera. Or they were, more so Britain than the U.S. were backing Stepan Bandera, an ally of Hitler who was, staunchly anti-Russian, anti-Polish, anti-Jewish. And they've allowed this ethno-nationalist ideology that holds Bandera as a hero to fester in Ukraine.
It's all a lot more complicated than this, by the way. And I'm saying this is a Polish person, okay? Bandera is a lot more complicated than that, okay? Even though the anti-Polish sentiment was real, it was all a lot more complicated than this. It's pretty insulting. I hope I don't have to tell you that this person is insulting your intelligence. Yes. Keep in mind, I've told you about this. There was conflict between Ukraine and Poland. Remember,
And they funneled money into
after
it.
World War One, Ukraine and Poland waged war to decide which country should get Lviv, for example, right? Yeah. So there was tension between Ukraine and Poland at that time because those countries literally waged war to decide which terrains of the old Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth should come to which newly formed nation state. And between 1918 and 1920, Polish and Ukraine waged war for Lviv, and Poland emerged victorious, and Lviv became a part of Poland. It's all quite complicated. It is not simple history, and it is not a simple matter of answering if Lviv should have went to Poland or to Ukraine after World War One. On one hand, the city itself, Lviv, was a majority Polish city, but on the other hand, a lot of Ukrainians lived around Lviv, in the terrains around Lviv. So Ukraine sort of declared that these terrains, including Lviv, are now part of the newly formed Ukraine, and the citizens of Lviv wanted to be part of the newly formed Poland, and it caused a war between Poland and Ukraine, which ended in Poland winning. And all I can say is, personally, it's conflicts like that one, which just makes me more adamant in disliking the concept of nation states. That is the main thing that I'm gonna say. Okay, I'm not a big fan of nation states as a concept because it leads to conflicts like that.
They could,
My
or
opinion.
until those paramilitaries and militias became emboldened enough to where they could wage a full scale war against the largely Russian speaking and the largely culturally Russian people in Eastern Ukraine,
Of course.
who were beginning, like you said, to separate and see what was going on with the Maidan coup, this anti-Russian government take power.
Well, hold on now. Wait, you added a little detail there.
True.
We're beginning to separate. What happened? You're this timeline that you keep omitting things. I just want to get a full picture. What was the date?
Started separating.
In the Donbass begin to take place from the right sector?
Like full-scale military actions to where they're able to act with impunity. Because before
I'm just
that,
wondering
there was
if anything happened beforehand.
Because the conflict between the
Oh my
nationalists
God.
and the Russian speakers in Ukraine has been raging for a long time. Right, the 2014 coup really brought it to a head because it allowed groups like Right Sector to act with impunity and start blowing up the homes of civilians.
Blowing up.
I asked for a date.
It's not shelling anymore. Now it's blowing up the homes of civilians.
2014. Yeah,
That's
dude,
not a date,
I don't know
Eddie,
the
that's a
exact.
year.
I do not know the exact month, time, and date when the first shell was fired at civilian homes in the Donbass.
Okay.
But I can tell you that 2014 onward, 14,000 people were killed there. The majority of them being people in the Donbass. Yes,
Yeah,
of course,
that's
there were
horrible.
people killed on the
So,
Ukrainian side. That's how war
The
works.
reason I'm asking, because I, a neutrally minded person who's just looking to get the straight facts, I'm reading up on this right now, and it says that on April 12th, 2014, of course, armed members of the Donbass People's Militia seized government buildings in Kramatorsk and Sovyansk and set up checkpoints and barricades. And the same day, former members of the Donetsk Berkut unit of the Donbass People's Militia. So it seemed like, now I don't know the exact timeline here, you'll have to fill me in. It seems like there was an actual armed military insurrection in the Donbass, which makes me wonder if any violence that took place there afterwards might have actually been provoked by these separatist groups.
I'm just curious.
We like talking about provocation.
Is Wikipedia the source on that?
No. Do you want like the source? Do you want to look at it?
Yeah, I'll take it.
Wait,
I'll
actually,
take it. But yeah,
wait,
yeah,
wait.
yeah.
What's your
and
date?
like
for
I-
Oh. Oh God, this kid needs a few books. Yeah. Are you talking about me?
What?
What's your date for that though? Are you denying that ever happened?
Uh-oh.
No. Like as I said,
No,
earlier,
no, no,
not
no,
only
no,
were
no,
there,
no.
there groups who were arming up and defending themselves in the Donbass, but those groups were backed by Russia. Russia was supporting these groups, right? That doesn't
what happened
justify
first?
a fascist ethno-nationalist coup, right? Of course,
What?
if you see these ethno-nationalists who
The
have
coup was
hated Russians
before.
for years, who are putting up statues of Stepan
God.
Bandera,
Wait,
this
you're
mass
getting
murderer,
confused again.
this
The
mass
coup-
murderer who hated Russians, and these groups
Yanukovych
like
was
Right
ousted.
Sector
Oh,
continuing
man.
to seize in these groups like Right Sector continuing to seize more and more power. Yeah,
Eddie,
But yeah, Bandera is more. It is true that because he said that Bandera was anti-Polish, it is important to remember, and it is actually a thing that it's pointed out to Polish people as well, that Bandera is sort of used in Ukrainian mythos more as an anti-USSR figure than any sort of anti-Poland figure, if that makes sense. I just thought I'd insert it in there because it feels.
you're gonna arm yourself.
You're
You're,
getting
gonna
the-
defend yourself.
you're getting the-
This is people defending their home.
you're getting the
right,
timeline confused.
from-
Eddie, you're getting the timeline confused. The coup was before this. It seems like to me Yanukovych was ousted, and then military groups in the east formed the Donbass People's Militia and
Yes,
seized government
as
buildings.
I said before, dude. As I said,
Dude.
I feel like you're playing dumb on
Then-
purpose.
wait, then where did
because you're
Ukraine-
smarter than this? As I said before, the conflict. let
Oh
me finish.
God.
The conflict between the Ukrainian ethno-nationals
Oh
and
man.
the Russian speakers was going on for a very, very, very long time.
Very, 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 very long time.
Allowed it to come to a head and essentially gave these groups like Right Sector, who have always hated Russian-speaking people in the Donbass,
Oh yeah.
ethnically Russian people, in the Donbass,
Always.
to act with impunity
I'm
and
getting
start
confused
shooting them.
again, Eddie.
So yes, there were militia. No, you're confused. There were
That's
militias
what I- that's
in
what
the
I
Donbass
said.
who
See-
were arming themselves.
Oh my God. I'm getting confused, Eddie. No, you're getting confused. Also, yeah, Ukrainian people famously hate people that speak Russian, even though a lot of Ukrainian people actually speak Russian. So you saying that Ukrainian people hate people that speak Russian just speaks of it just means that you have no idea about Ukraine. You don't know anything about Ukraine, okay? If you think that Ukrainian people hate Russian speakers. A lot of Ukrainian people are Russian speakers, you know?
Preparing to protect themselves before the coup happened.
Okay,
Yes, and
so-
yeah, Russia was supporting them.
It's just
That doesn't mean I
interesting.
support a Nazi coup.
Whoa, hold-
It doesn't mean I support blowing
you're
up
running-
people's homes.
you're running-
And it doesn't mean in
you're
this broader
out-
conflict I'm going to side with
You're
NATO.
moving on. All right, we're pulling you back. Okay. So
Oh,
it's just
true.
interesting that when you initially described what began in the Donbass, you said there was a coup, and then the Right Sector marched over and started shelling civilians. And what you neglected to mention was several thousand militiamen and former soldiers trying to secede from the government,
Uh-oh.
government buildings. So
I
it
didn't-
seems like there was a middle point there where the way you described it, I thought these guys, they did the coup, Yanukovych ousted, and then they just went over and started killing Russian-speaking people in the east.
Uh-oh.
Then in the middle of those two things, there were actually thousands of soldiers who seized government buildings and set up barricades. That, I don't know, Eddie, as a person who's just learning about this, I feel like that might actually warrant some kind of military aggression in response.
Uh-oh.
I mean,
What
also
would you
these are
do if
places
people
that
seized
these are
government
also
buildings?
places that voted to become independent republics. So they're perfect. As I said, it's their own.
Oh.
They've lived for years. So they're
That's
perfect.
not
Yeah, that's like what happened with Texas, didn't it?
how countries work,
They're
Eddie.
perfectly right. to,
True.
You know, take to hold control of government buildings in that region, especially when it's obvious that Right Sector and these other groups are going to want to gain control of buildings in eastern Ukraine.
That's
So the
not how
people of the
countries
Donbass
work,
dug
Eddie.
on their heels.
Are
And
you
also,
familiar with the Civil
you're
War?
lying and you're saying that I just said everything started with a coup. No, I've been very, very clear that this is a conflict that culminated in the coup. and that the people in the Donbass were preparing to have to defend themselves
Oh yeah.
from the ethno-nationalists who had been a
Oh,
persistent
yeah.
problem in Ukraine. I mean, they knew that for years, right?
I did ask you for a starting point. You said the coup, but that's okay. We can amend this as much as we need to. It's a complicated bit of history. However, I'm sorry to say, we don't actually live in a communist utopia. Just because people in an area don't want to be part of a country doesn't actually mean that you can have thousands of soldiers seize local government positions. That's the kind of thing that does lead to military aggression. If you've paid attention
So then
to your
you're
history,
against the
whoa,
Euromaidan
hold on, wait, hold
coup
on.
as
I'm
well.
not done. Hold on. If you pay attention to your history class, there was a thing in the United States called the Civil War, where the South argued that they had the right to secede from the Union because they
True.
had different values and goals. They were wrong, apparently. History proved them wrong. This actually happens quite a lot, You can't have, like, Texas
Uh-oh.
can secede today. You would need a really strong moral argument for secession in order for there to be, I think, a reasonable discussion.
Yeah,
on
like
the subject.
civilians having their homes bombed by neo-Nazis.
Wait,
How's that for a
Wait,
strong
but
moral
they
argument?
formed the militia before the fighting started.
So is it bombed or shelled? Heh. Oh, Jesus said. Jesus.
Yes, but the neo-Nazis had been there long before, and they had been killing people long before. But
You see-
Oh, yeah.
they were
The
able to
timeline.
act with impunity and escalate it greatly. Again,
Oh,
you
yeah.
come on purpose.
Wait,
come on.
I think we're both confused about the timeline now. So there was this fighting in the Donbass before because you didn't even mention the thousands of people in the Donbass militia. What else are you leaving out of this? What did the right
I
sector
mentioned
do
the people in the Donbass
East
militia, and I
to
even said they're
warrant
backed by Russia.
thousands of soldiers rising up to seize government buildings? Because as far as I
Jesus
can tell,
lying.
that's the first violent thing that happened. Seems like Russia's provoking
No,
conflict.
that's
I
not the
don't
first.
know.
It'd be impossible to place the first violent thing that happened, but based
Mhm.
on my knowledge, you could go all the way back to World War II with the massacres that Stepan Bandera committed against Jews and Poles and all sorts of.
That was the first time there was
minorities in
violence
Ukraine.
in Ukraine?
No, I said you could go back way further than that, but based
Oh.
on my knowledge of Ukraine, that's where I could pinpoint, or that's where I know
Oh my
the first
God.
ethno-nationalist violence happening. Obviously, there's tons of violence in every country
What an
going back all
idiot.
throughout their history.
Sometimes,
I feel
people
like you're
get
trying
in
to get
fights in
caught
the
up on
streets.
semantics here because you realize your broader argument puts you in support of NATO and NATO-backed.
Wait.
neo-Nazis.
We haven't even
My
I haven't
God.
even made an argument. I'm just really interested in the timeline. We keep finding little bits that you leave out, but that's okay. We're both learning, right? I mean, you learned about the Civil War and that you
I
can't
haven't
actually
learned
secede.
anything from this. You're just
Well,
asking semantics debates, and I'm trying to explain
That seems
a
like
really
a personal
complex
problem,
piece
man.
of history that led
It does, doesn't
to
it?
conflict.
I'm learning.
It does.
So okay, let me.
Good. I'm
Okay,
glad
let's
I could educate you.
let's reestablish that.
Oh yeah.
So Yanukovych is ousted.
Oh.
Protests, Euromaidan, blah blah. And then thousands of soldiers in the east, the separatists, seize control of.
You know what? I'm actually really enjoying this debate. I'm actually enjoying this debate style.
buildings, set up barricades, blockades, so on and so forth. And then in response to military occupation,
I'm
of
enjoying this
property,
debate style.
soldiers move east in order to fight them. Am I incorrect on this?
Soldiers who had just occupied government property in Kiev and
So they
ousted the
really did move
democratically
1,000
elected
miles
government,
east.
Who the people in eastern Ukraine, I love how you ask a question, then you immediately have to interrupt.
You
me,
said
'cause
they
you
didn't
don't
just
want me
walk
to explain
1,000
the
miles
truth to your
east right
audience.
after, but I guess
That's
they
so
did.
funny. You won't even let me finish. You ask me a question, then you don't let me finish the sentence.
Let me
It's funny
finish.
that they walked 1,000 miles east right after the coup, but it
Do
doesn't
you
matter.
think-
They can do that if planes exist, man. Did you know that? Okay, so
Yes, and there's
the
also
coup-
people from right sector, man, all over the country. They weren't
Everywhere.
concentrated in
Oh
Kiev.
yeah,
The
everywhere.
leadership was a lot of them where they seized government buildings and ousted the democratically elected leader who the people in the Donbass rightfully voted for.
Well,
The people on the Donbass saw the writing on the wall and organized themselves
I mean, the people of the Donbass were not the people of the entirety of Ukraine, right?
and got ready to defend their own territory from this neo-Nazi, undemocratically elected U.S. puppet government that took power.
Oh,
U.S.
And that's
puppet
what led into the war of the Donbass.
Okay, so let's address this. Every time I ask you a question, you take 5 minutes to remind me about
Yes,
all the
because
Nazis
wars are
in
very
government.
complex, like you said.
Well, of
It
course,
takes
of course.
a long time
So
to explain these things.
I'm looking for an opportunity to learn more on this particular subject. So it seems like in terms of organized violence following the coup, it was actually your guys who started it. Thousands of soldiers seizing government buildings is undeniably an act of martial aggression, arguably war, especially since you've acknowledged the fact that Russia backed them. So it seems like Russia both started and provoked this war. But I'm interested in the moral side of things, right? You keep talking about the right sector, the Nazis, the so on and so forth, right? Now again, I don't know anything about this whole subject, but I'm aware even of Azov Battalion, there being Nazis in Ukraine. I mean, I've heard the stories.
You don't know who right sector is?
No, I didn't say. I just said I know about. Well, hold on. Wait, listen. Do you want me to? Okay, that's fine. We'll keep going.
I just thought you said that. That was surprising to me. So I just wanted clarification.
No. I know. I've heard stories about all this.
Okay.
You know, about the Nazis and what have you. But what's interesting to me is that when I look at Ukraine's government broadly, I don't really get the impression of a genocidal government. You know, the Nazis government, like the Nazis, right, were genocidal, of course. That was key and component to their ideology. I saw stuff Ukraine has done that I don't agree with. There was the Ukraine language law, for example. I think that's pretty cringe. I don't support that. But
You don't see that as a genocidal policy to try and crack down on minority languages and the main thing about the language.
No. There's a difference between. You see, this is like a big misunderstanding on people that have no clue on history. There's a difference between cracking down on a minority language and a country doing Russification, because Ukraine, sadly, for a long time has been basically colonized by Russia. Russified. Look up Russification. And Ukraine trying to undo the process of Russification is not, quote unquote, cracking down on minority languages. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Law too is it tries to assert the Ukrainian identity as being people who speak Ukrainian. So it's actually designed to say Russian speakers are not Ukrainian. They don't have a place in our country.
No, that is false. There are many Ukrainians who speak Russian. But at the same time, it is normal for Ukraine to assert that in fact the main language being used there is Ukrainian. Yeah. It is in fact natural to want to undo Russification. Yes.
It's a form of dehumanization.
all right, I think
It goes right along with genocidal
so.
policy.
I think that's a little hysterical. I think
Yeah.
it's bad, and I agree that it indicates ethnic and linguistic preference. Many countries have national languages or have legal distinctions between preferred and non-preferred languages. I'm not defending
Right, and
the
that's
law.
not what I have. That's not what experts on this issue have a problem with. What they
Experts on this issue.
Are they
Russian experts.
What experts have said is the issue with the Ukrainian language law is that it asserts a single identity for the people of Ukraine based on the language that they speak. You know, which then dehumanizes and says that the people who speak Russian aren't actually Ukrainian citizens. They don't have a place here. Which,
I
you know,
agree that it
starts to lean
indicates
towards
ethnic
a
bias.
genocidal policy. It might be. It's definitely hyperbolic to say that in itself is genocide.
That comes a
But
bit
it's certainly an
namby-pamby to me.
anti-Russian policy that could go hand in hand with genocide. I also want to say, to go back to
But we weren't
something that
done-
you said earlier that I let slip.
That is a very US-centric view, by the way. That is a very US-centric view.
Learning
This
more.
is in response to what you said. You said that most of the violence was committed by quote unquote my guys in the Donbass.
They
these
started it seems.
paramilitaries.
into
Yeah.
Organized violence, yeah.
Their acts of organized violence pale. I mean, them digging their
Pale.
heels and defending their own land from the undemocratically elected coup government pales in comparison to, say, the Maidan sniper attacks that were committed by the protesters. And we now know, thanks to the scholarship of Ivan Kachanovsky, were being led up by these ethno-nationalist forces, Right Sector, C-14, Azov Battalion, etc. Or
I'm very
the
happy to
Odessa
hear
Trade
that you
Union
remembered
House
another
building,
talking point you forgot to go
which-
over. But it's kind of going
or
backwards
the
now.
Odessa trade union
Wait,
building
Eddie,
where trade unionists were burned alive.
Eddie,
These acts of violence,
Eddie,
anything that the people
Eddie,
of the Donbass did
Eddie,
to
you
defend
might
themselves
notice.
pales in comparison
You
to
might
those.
notice
Which,
That you don't know anything.
Hey, no, hold on. Are you reading off a script? I saw your pupils wander. Wait, are you reading from chat right now? Did somebody in
you
your
wanna
chat
see
remind you?
I literally I don't even have the Zoom open. I can't even see myself.
I
It's
saw
just
your
you on
eyes
a little
wander. It
box.
was like you had a paragraph you forgot to read, and you were like, "Wait, hold on, gotta start this." Man, it's okay. I'm here. Listen,
why are you
this is
saying-
my
You're
job.
just
We can talk
lying.
about
This is
all
so
of this.
fucking funny.
Wait, what did I just lie about?
Hold on, let me. You lied and said I'm reading off a script. Let me screenshot my screen and send it to you.
Wait, but your eyes wandered off the screen though. Do you have anything
Okay,
written
my
down
eyes
near you?
wander a lot.
Show me your entire
I'm
house.
trying to think. I'm trying to think of a lot of complex.
Show me your
stuff.
whole house right now.
Wars are very complex, like you said.
So we were talking about who instigated martial organized violence, and what you
Jesus.
just said has
I'm
nothing
taking
to
a
do with it.
screenshot right now to prove this because that's hilarious.
Sure. Can you give me like a video
I
tour of your
don't
house
care.
after we're done too, just so I can really check to make sure that you did all this like off the cuff?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I spent all day reading and researching because unlike you, I actually
Oh, yeah.
the things that I talk about.
Oh, for sure.
Prove it.
Yes,
Okay.
I will.
Thank you. So
And then
anyway,
you make a video
Oh.
reading all the theory.
so tangents aside, we were talking
What
about
an idiot.
the language
Oh,
law.
there you
Oh,
go.
yeah, you were being a bit hysterical about it. I agree it's very bad. I don't think it's genocidal. But apart from all of that, I don't get the impression the Ukrainian government is, well, genocidal. A Jewish president is a pretty strong argument against Nazi organization. I mean, I know that's a pretty common one, but again, it's like Jews are a big no-no to Nazis.
True.
You said yourself that Bandera types are pro-Nazi, anti-Jew. It's just odd that Zelensky would see not only successful elections, but like now overwhelmingly successful elections in
Yeah.
the face of the recent 3-day special military operation.
I like Zelensky personally. I don't know about you guys, but I do like Zelensky.
Yeah, I would say it's a big misconception, even on
Oh,
pro-Russia, anti-NATO left, that people think all of Ukraine is Nazis or that, the leadership themselves are Nazis. Like Poroshenko at multiple points, Zelensky at multiple points have tried to quell the conflict, have tried to quell the fighting between the ethno-nationalists. But there's videos of Zelensky going into the Donbass region and having talks with these leaders of these ethno-nationalist groups and asking them to lay down arms, and they essentially mock him. Right? They essentially say, no, we're not going to listen to you. We can act with impunity now.
oh yeah,
So
for
it's
sure.
not
Why
that
can they act
all
with
of
impunity?
Ukraine is neo-Nazis or Zelensky himself is a neo-Nazi. It's that Zelensky's just a NATO puppet that's a
Oh yeah. Zelensky's just a
impunity, and those are
puppet.
the ones who really have the power in Ukraine.
Oh yeah.
As exemplified by the fact that Right Sector was the one who, during the coup, seized the government buildings instead until Yanukovych
sure.
is dismissed.
So-
We're
For
not
sure.
gonna hand back the government.
Okay, so
so they're the
For
ones-
sure.
I
For
appreciate
sure.
you acknowledging this. So you're saying that the government of Ukraine is not actually run by the democratically elected leader who enjoys massive popular support from the country, but rather a group of far-right militiamen who are fighting in the east. How did they do that?
Run is I mean, there's conflicting political parties in Ukraine, conflicting political ideas, and there's conflict, within the Ukrainian
But
parliament.
how, like, what
So there's no one
mechanism-
person running things, right? But these ethno-nationalists, since the coup, when they seized
My
hold
guy.
of the government buildings and dismissed the democratically elected leader, have had
Well,
an
he fled.
outsized
They can't-
influence and an outsized power in this country.
You can't dismiss a leader like that. They don't have the authority. He fled
True.
to Russia.
Right. No, well, let me read straight from the I
Horse's
have a
mouth.
quote here in my notes of
Your
Oh,
notes.
wow.
the guy from
I thought you didn't have anything to read from.
No,
Uh-oh.
I have a script, and I told you I have notes because I've been reading about this all day, and I can see that you haven't done much reading.
Eddie,
Vaush.
I didn't do reading because I was looking forward to being educated by you. It's kind of shocking that I've had to correct you on so many inconsistencies. In the
True.
You haven't corrected shit.
Oh, well.
The agreements that were reached after Right Sector seized hold of the major
Oh
government
my
buildings
God.
in Kiev. The agreements that we have reached do not correspond to our aspirations.
What is this a
Right
quote
Sector
from?
will not lay down arms. Right Sector will not lift the blockade of a single administrative building until our main demand is met. The resignation of Yanukovych. Then Yanukovych resigned and he exiled. After Right Sector literally seized hold of all the major government buildings after massacring a bunch of people in Maidan Square.
Oh yeah.
When Yanukovych was trying to stay in power and keep the government going, right sector said, we're not going to lay down arms and we're not going to give back the government buildings until this guy leaves. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about when we say these ethno-nationalist groups have an outsized influence in Ukraine. And actually, I didn't even know this so much until I was reading today. It's increased since 2014. Right. At first, Zelensky was giving speeches trying to bring peace, trying to calm down these ethno-nationalist groups, but they've continued to grow in size, continue to gain power and outsized influence in Ukraine until Russia intervened, and then essentially, Zelensky had no choice but to
Eddie,
and the U.S. had no choice but to use the Azov Battalion and these other groups as their main fighting force.
Fighting force.
You did it again. We ran off. I wasn't listening to the past couple of sentences because I don't think they were relevant.
Right.
To what
Listening's hard, dude. It's hard. That's how you learn.
It can be hard because I have to keep up with the jibber jabber.
These are complex things, so you got to stay focused.
Yeah, I agree. You really should because you keep wandering off. I'm not saying I don't trust you, but I was kind of curious about this narrative. So I looked up this Euromaidan or Revolution of Dignity thing, and I'm really curious about this. So it seems that there were about 25,000 Euromaidan protesters present. Were those all...
Russia helped them grow in the first place?
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
No,
I'm just curious. No, wait. I was just asking for information. It's fine.
I'm
just curious. Because I don't know, right? I'm learning today.
Right. No, they weren't. But those were the ones who escalated it into a violent coup, which is why the U.S. NGOs realized, needed to make bedfellows with the most horrible people in Ukraine.
Of course.
Right, which is what they do pretty much every time, because the only way to turn the protest violent into something that could actually oust the Ukrainian government was to support these groups who were willing to, say, shoot people with sniper rifles in Maidan Square.
You're doing it again, but we'll get to that because that's a little bit down. So of course there was a big protest.
I gotta fully flesh out these answers because they're not just simple.
Flesh takes time to build. You're in the womb for 9 months. All right. Now this call's not going to last that long, but we have time to build this out. Don't worry. So Yanukovych fled. He fled, of course, because the parliament there was shooting at the Capitol and stuff. We can litigate the exact details of that.
Eddie is a result of a failed U.S. education system. True.
But
hello, Connor.
After that,
we're testing the new camera. How do you like it? How do you like the new quality of the camera? I have my Ukraine badge here.
Happened. The person who was put in power after Yanukovych fled, sort of the next in line, as I understand it, he was just the next big guy. And then after that, they resumed the traditional democratic process. Normally, a coup means you put your guys in charge.
He's not here to actually argue for what he believes. He's just there to monologue over Vaush. Yeah. But then again, most of them are, so it's not even a surprise at this point.
But the right sector didn't put anyone. There wasn't an actual leader chosen by a group of violent protesters or a militia group. Unlike, by the way, the Donbass, where...
I remember now who that is.
The Luhansk and Donetsk autonomous spheres have been undemocratically controlled by military leaders. How can this be a coup if they just resume the normal democratic process?
I mean, it's not a normal democratic process for them to say we're not handing back the government buildings until you dismiss the democratically elected leader Yanukovych. That is a coup. But like I said, it's more useful to have somebody like Poroshenko who's more center-right by Ukrainian standards, which are extremely far-right, who will allow them to act
for sure
and do what they want, but who isn't openly an ethno-nationalist themselves, who gives the face of wanting peace and wanting to end the civil war, especially before the Russian special military operation began.
But how did they...
These leaders really want... Ukraine, the ethno-nationalists in Ukraine didn't want, to draw a whole bunch of global attention. Well, that's hard. Never mind. I'll take back my last sentence.
Yeah, no, I get it. So how did they put a guy in charge, though?
They said they seized hold of the government buildings and said until, like that quote I just read from you, and said until you put somebody in charge who we are okay with, who ended up being Poroshenko, who had increasingly for years been shifting right and moving right mostly for political reasons to try and appeal to these groups who were gaining a lot of power in Ukraine. They said, until you put in a leader that we're okay with, like Poroshenko, we're going to maintain hold of these buildings, the ethno-nationalist right sector.
So are you suggesting that the entire government of Ukraine...
Unfortunately, I cannot tell you. Also, what game is this? This is Warcraft 1. This is Warcraft 1, the very first Warcraft game with which the whole of the Warcraft franchises started. You know? Everything Warcraft related started with this game. There would be no World of Warcraft without this game. Have I won? Did I win? How did I not win yet? What's happening?
Kowtowed to occupying protesters? How many
They
right
did-
sector
they
people?
cowed-
Like the entire, like, wait, I'm just so
They-
I
they
fully
didn't-
understand. You're suggesting that the guy that was in charge after Yanukovych, who was like the next in line because he had the most proportional support in the parliament after Yanukovych and such, who was only in charge for I think 8 months before they resumed normal democratic elections. The right sector somehow made that guy the guy.
Yeah, by seizing the government buildings, by escalating the protests into a violent coup.
Ah,
All of the major government buildings in Kiev, and saying until
All
you
of
put
the
in,
major
in
government
power,
buildings in Kiev. It's a big city.
until you put, well, I don't know, a lot of the major government buildings in Kiev, until you put in power a leader that we're okay with. And, you know, Ukraine had been, you know, like I said, ethno-nationalism and far-right politics have been a problem in Ukraine for a while. So there are a lot of members
forever.
in parliament and a lot of politicians in Ukraine who lean towards, you know, center-right or far-right politics.
But who would
So
have
there
been
were
the
a lot
leader?
of better options for right sector in these ethno-nationalist groups, such as Poroshenko. Yanukovych wanted to get rid of the language laws. He wanted to remove Stepan Bandera as a national hero, who was then re-implemented.
Wait, we're
as a
running
national
ahead. We're
hero
running
after
ahead
the
again.
coup.
I was just
No,
asking because you
these
didn't
are
really.
these are
But you didn't
important.
answer.
You asked me how
so-
right sector sees control of
Okay,
the government.
well, no.
And
Wait.
I'm explaining how.
No, you misunderstand. First of all, you weren't telling me how they seized control. You were telling me how they used that control to
I
get
see just one more gaming franchise I didn't grow up with. Well, you know, you're growing up with it now.
the person in charge.
How do I
Second of
end
all,
this
You're
mission?
telling me what they said, but people say lots of stuff. If I went over with a microphone to say the January 6th protests, right? And I put my microphone up to a bunch of people and asked them, you know, what are you here for? I would get a wide range of things, many of them delusional perspectives, threats, expectations. They say they're not going to leave until a suitable leader is chosen. But the leader that got chosen was the next up guy. So could
Uh-oh.
Their guy.
Well-
it was the guy who was going to allow them to act with impunity. It was the anti-Russian guy.
it was the net? Well, I mean, at this point now, all of Ukraine's government
and
is
also
anti-Russian.
also let me say that
Also,
was
wait,
the
is it a
leader
big
and the
surpri-
founder of right sector who said that. It wasn't just some random Trump supporter
Sure,
that you would
well,
interview on
leaders
Oh.
of far-right
The guy
groups
who
known for
led
their
this
sane.
up.
We still have to play
able to seize
Draken
hold of the
Car.
government buildings.
You're still
Like
misunderstanding.
it would be like if January 6 protesters actually seized hold of the Capitol and Trump came out and said, you know, we're not gonna let go of the Capitol until you put in power, you know, someone that we want.
It seems like, from what I'm looking at right now, the goal of the Euromaidan protesters were to oust Yanukovych, and the guy that got put in after Yanukovych was the obvious next person because he was the one with the next most support. He was literally the opposition party, and he was only in charge for a little bit, and then the normal democratic process resumed. The reason this is interesting to me is because when I think coup, I've read about a lot of coups. The United States loves doing them, huh? You should read about that sometime. It's crazy how bad this government gets. But when
yeah,
we do,
I gotta read about coups. You're right.
Yeah, when
you have
we
not
do-
watched our content, have you?
when we do, no, I haven't.
I
When
can
we
tell.
normally when I read about coups, like what does that mean? It usually means like the authoritarian, like placing of a leader in power, not just one leader gets ousted and then the normal process resumes for everyone.
Uh-oh.
Which is what happened. The fill-in was the next up, and then after
they
that, the
banned
elections
the Russian
happened.
language and started to ban opposition media and Lugansk and Donetsk declared themselves independent republics, and there was essentially a war going
Wait,
on.
what does that
So
have?
it's not like things just, you know, went back to normal after they ousted
No,
the
I
democratically
agree.
elected
Russia
leader.
made things way worse. I fully agree with that. But that doesn't change the
That's
fact that
not what I said.
that's what I heard. And it's what you
Well,
implied,
you
right?
have selective hearing, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, we can
Everything's
get back
Russia
to that.
bad.
So it seems like this coup was really just the ousting of Yanukovych. You've talked about how, like, the far right has
Uh-oh.
been controlling Ukraine by putting their guys in power. I don't really think that's demonstrated by the evidence we have. I mean, you also
By-
acknowledge that a lot of the Euromaidan protesters weren't even far right. What proportion of the 25,000 were right sector? When I take a look
the
at
ones who were
polls,
shooting people and the ones who organized themselves and seized power of government buildings and
numerically a
Uh-oh.
then
proportion.
demanded that the politics then play out the way that they wanted.
Well, the way that they were
I
going
mean,
to anyway, after the ousting of Yanukovych, right? Like, after
do you-
Yanukovych got ousted, what happened
and also,
was like the
how
normal
familiar are you
result.
with color revolutions in East Europe? Because you say that coups are always, just the authoritarian, whatever that means. I mean, we should lay out what authoritarian means concretely, but a coup has to be the placing of a leader in power. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that U.S. coups are carried out. And a lot of times it's very subversive. It's very underhanded. It's not just the U.S. coming in or the CIA coming
man.
in, like, what they did in 1951 in Iran, getting rid of Mossadegh and putting in power who they want. A lot of times it involves finding the actors on the ground who are going to allow U.S. interests to be carried out. So that's what the U.S. found in these banderites in Ukraine, which is why they've supported them since World War II and why they found them very useful. So there's all sorts of ways that color revolutions and coups happen. And this is just a perfect example of one. It actually parrots
A color revolution
a lot of
is
the
when a
other color
country
revolutions, including
likes
the Orange
people?
Revolution in Ukraine. What?
A color revolution is when a government likes people?
A color revolution is essentially a coup.
Well, that's
it's-
a circular definition if ever I heard one. I was asking, I think people of color should be able to do their revolutions if they want, we're all equal. What's
Yeah, that's what
what's the
Why the-
color revolution is just a term for like when
What a
U.S.
weird-
NGOs back certain groups who then
What a weird laugh.
which works in the U.S.'s interest.
Oh yeah, that's happened for
It
sure. I've
doesn't
read
mean
about
that
those.
people of color are doing it.
I
And
know
trust
that-
me, the neo-Nazis who took over
that was a
Ukraine
bit.
were not people of color. And
Well,
they don't like people of color.
The original Nazis probably would consider them people of color, which is kind of funny when you think about the way Nazi ideology shifts and molds to suit the needs of the people who use it for power.
does.
Like those
I agree
Banderite
there.
types, right? No, I fully agree. They're bad. I just don't know if they've had as much influence over the way things have petered out as you suggest they have. Not to speak of this nebulous claim of U.S. support. Now, would the U.S. support the Euromaidan protesters, considering Yanukovych is, let's say, Russia-friendly? Sure, fully, of course. I'm sure there were plenty of U.S. politicians, leaders, maybe even celebrities. George Clooney going down to Kiev to say, protests, get that Yanukovych guy out of here.
George Clooney.
I don't know if that in and of itself can be fairly called like a coup or a color revolution, though, right? Because if that's the case, it seems like everyone's color revolutioning all the time.
Is ADHD a form of neurodivergency?
Whenever there's civil unrest.
Well, it wasn't just blanket U.S. support. There was a leaked phone call from Jeffrey Pyatt and Victoria.
Elite
Nuland,
phone
where they're
call.
talking about the different actors in Ukraine, and
elite phone
essentially
call.
plotting out together how they can escalate the protests into the actual violent overthrow of a government.
Oh.
So it's been very conniving and very strategic from the U.S. every step of the way. It's not just a blanket support. As I said,
We've talked about the phone call. It's BS. Okay? Apparently the phone call is actually the opposite of what this person is saying. Apparently the phone call was not about doing a coup, as this person says, but it was about actually not doing a coup, if you can believe it. Believe it.
they've supplied
What came of that?
logistics and information and political support for these groups as well.
Well, what-
Based on the changing situation in Ukraine. It's not just funneling arms and weapons into these preferred groups, which is basically what it became after the war.
What
now
came
the
of that
U.S.
phone
is just
call, though?
funneling money and arms into Ukraine as our country.
Oh, we're gonna talk about the phone call.
We're still in 2014. We're still in 2014. Hold on. What came of that phone call? It's like a call in and of itself is. I mean, who among us hasn't had a call with our friends saying, you know, I think we should plot to overthrow Yanukovych? I'm sure lots of people have done this. What came of it?
I can't say I've ever had a call where I plot out what's going to happen with Ukraine's government. I think that's exclusive to Victoria Nuland and Jeffrey Pyatt, Victoria Nuland has been overseeing U.S. policy in Ukraine for a long time.
Well, what did they
One of the
do?
most powerful people in the U.S. in relation to Ukraine. What was that? Sorry.
But what did they do?
You wanna pull up the call right now? I have it.
No. The call is a call. I mean, what did they do?
Funneled money into preferred groups via NGOs and groups like the CIA cut out the NED, and actually the CIA themselves have been involved in this too.
What groups did they support?
Groups, incited those groups to
Among Us. True.
And escalated the protests and the civil unrest to the point where these U.S.-backed groups could oust Yanukovych, who, like you said, the U.S. didn't like, which allowed the U.S. to begin building up military and arms in Ukraine.
Okay,
which is part of NATO's broader effort, their broader strategy to attack Russia, which they've admitted openly. That's what they're doing right now.
Now I have more questions than I have answers.
Oh my
I still
gosh.
don't know what exactly
it's a complicated issue, isn't it?
I
You should
fully
have read
agree.
it
Right?
before the
Help
debate.
elucidate for me. With regards to the money being funneled and so on, like, what did they actually? I mean, like in a direct sense, right? Because I want to keep things really concrete because I know there's a lot of broad conspiracism when it comes to color revolution talk. I'll tell you an example. Okay, here. Okay, U.S. history, right? Now, a lot of people back during the civil rights movement said that Malcolm X, especially Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., were actually Soviet-backed infiltrators who were trying to destabilize the United States. This is false, of course. But it turns out, and we know this through historical records, there actually were a decent number of people pushing civil rights in the U.S. who had ties to Soviet Russia. They were not insubstantial ties either. Now, I personally, I think that's fine because, shit, I like civil rights, you know? Get your money where you need to, King. Literally. We need some civil rights in here. But do you think a person today could then fairly say that the U.S. civil rights movement was a color revolution meant to coup the culture of the United States from the Soviet Union? Or would it be more nebulous?
No, I think a bunch of German fascists in 1940
German fascists
overthrew or seized U.S. government buildings and said, if you don't dismiss our democratically elected leader, a bunch of U.S. fascists who were being backed by Germany, rather, seized hold of the White House and said, if you don't dismiss Franklin Delano Roosevelt and put in power someone who's more fascistic, more right-leaning, we're going to keep hold of the government buildings. That would be a color revolution.
Then I've got it. I've got an example.
I wouldn't say
of
the
one.
Soviet, the Soviets funneling some money into civil rights.
My God.
I've got it then. I've got it. Not a successful one, but January 6th. We know for a fact, thanks to a Senate investigation, that the Russian government actually did deliberately promote accounts and interests that were involved in the organization of January 6th. And a lot of people who have since been arrested, indicted, whatever else. There are, of course, multiple people on Trump's team who had connections to Russia to the point where it's gotten them indicted and or arrested. That would be an attempt at a color revolution. Russia tried to color revolution us. They didn't succeed, but do I have it right? Do I got it now?
I'm not.
I'm not at liberty.
On January. Honestly. Send me the thing about Russia funding people on January 6th. I would say that January 6th.
You're so educated about a country that is on the other side of the world, but you're so uneducated about your own country. That's so interesting. That is so interesting. I hate that I thought of that joke, but I don't know how to delete messages so that it stays.
comparison to Maidan, which lasted for months and had far more funding from Western NGOs than I'm assuming January 6th. I don't know how much Russia pushed into
Where'd the
it,
funding
but
come from?
Russia wasn't
Euromaidan?
able to turn January 6th, into like the sniper attacks in Maidan Square killed dozens of people, right? How many people died on January 6th? I believe it was one of the protesters. Right. These are not comparable events. It's
there was
not
a cop and a couple of people. I think one guy died of a heart attack.
right. So that's not comparable to, say, a fascist group burning dozens of trade unionists alive, right? In a
Yeah, that
major
does sound
symbolic trade union building, and then marching on the government and seizing power of it and saying, if you don't dismiss the president of the country and send him into exile, we're just going to keep hold of the government, right? That's not what happened on January 6th.
I'd still like it, though.
I
don't
don't say it's good, just being realistic.
So, in terms of the threshold for a color revolution, right? The U.S. has money everywhere because we're the wealthiest country on earth. There are NGOs and private actors all around the world, literally everywhere, who have connections to U.S. businesses, even those that operate in line with government interests. So I think, like, we want to be specific here, because if you want to say, well, U.S. money was involved in Euromaidan, U.S. money was involved in everything, like literally everything. There's not a conflict on earth you can't find U.S. money. I want to know what specifically. You say that they were being funded through NGOs. So was the State Department, like, specifically allotting money to a group of, like, CIA-associated NGOs to go to, like, the right sector? How did they facilitate this?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know the exact details, but that's why things like the leaked phone call help, where Victoria Nuland and Jeffrey Pyatt are literally talking about, okay, here's the situation in Ukraine. Who do we funnel money into now? So that we can see our interests carried out. And I mean, to ignore that NATO has marched eastward and has made it their goal to threaten and attack Russia.
You have more evidence.
Just to be ignorant.
You have more evidence.
So we know.
Just the
So
phone
let me
call,
finish.
right?
Though we know that this is part of the U.S.
My gosh.
strategy, right? We know that it's their project to attack Russia. We know that the CIA has supported ethno-nationalists in Ukraine since World War II to do this. Right now, we have a leaked phone call as U.S. NGOs are very active in Ukraine, and as Maidan is going on, and it's becoming increasingly violent. There's a phone call between the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine where they're talking about reorganizing Ukraine's government, how to control Ukraine's government. And this isn't some just random person in the U.S. This is Victoria Nuland, the person overseeing U.S. foreign policy in Ukraine. Right, so the main U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, the main person overseeing U.S. foreign policy in Ukraine, is talking about how to reorganize Ukraine's government as U.S. NGOs are funneling money into their preferred groups that they have been propping up in this area forever.
And that's very concerning.
Going back to the thing Angela Merkel admitted, Angela Merkel.
I like Vaush in this debate.
NATO's goal has always been to build up military.
I like Vaush in this one.
That they can attack Russia. Right, the coup fit right.
Vaush is so good in this one.
Eddie.
Which is
Eddie.
I know you
Ed and Eddie.
focus on something.
Well, I mean,
right,
on
but this
evidence
is part of a broader
concept.
and a longer history.
A broad and very vague.
And we need to bring in like evidence that the 2014 coup doesn't have to exclusively come from 2014.
I mean, you've laid
right?
out
go
a
all the way
pretty.
back to World War II.
No, I don't think money going to Ukraine in the 40s means that the U.S. orchestrated a 2014 coup. Wait, I'm so.
Oh my gosh.
That's not what
wait,
I
wait,
said. That's not what I said.
You
I
talked-
said that
you
is a
talked
factor
about
that
this
matters.
so
That the
wait,
if you were
Eddie.
a dialect
I think pretty much so, yeah. I think this person wants Russia to win.
Eddie,
material,
I'm
and you
trying to
know this too.
understand.
The
I'm
historical
trying to understand.
development of Ukraine
Eddie, I want to understand.
led to 2014,
Eddie, please.
so we need to be certain and we need to lay out the facts.
Eddie, please. Eddie.
Leading up.
Ed and Eddie.
No,
No, I'm not gonna be.
Okay, well, wait, so
Oh, I love the town.
you have to tell me. You've made so many confident
Loving the
statements
town.
about the U.S. involvement in this. Then you just said we don't have the details. Do you have a detail? Any specific?
Yes. So you just hyper focused on that part?
No, like
And then
anything.
You,
like
you
no.
missed the,
Literally
you ignored the
any.
part about the NGOs funneling money.
Yeah, that-
You
no,
missed
no,
the part
that's
about
what I'm
NATO
asking about.
training troops in
No,
Ukraine
no.
and
I'm
admitting
asking about
that
the
that's what they
NGOs
were doing. You
funneling
ignored
money.
the fact that
No,
Victoria
I'm
Nuland
no,
had a
I'm
leaked
asking.
phone where she talked about how she was reorganizing the government of
No,
Ukraine.
Eddie, I'm
how she
asking
was
you
involved in Ukraine
about that. I'm
and
asking
reorganizing
you,
their
Eddie.
government.
That
And
is
you
what I'm
ignored all of
asking
that
you about.
To hyper focus on the part where I said we don't know all of the
No.
details.
Oh boy.
I'm asking you
We don't.
about the
but I
money
just gave you a whole
being
plethora
funneled
of evidence
through
of
NGOs.
U.S. involvement in Ukraine
Eddie.
in the lead up to the 2014 overthrow of
Eddie,
the government.
I just asked for any evidence and you got upset. I'm asking you
True.
for anything regarding the financial transactions. I know about the phone call, but like anything, you're talking about, you spoke so confidently on US
Eddie.
involvement and multiple fundings and right sector connections and so on. I know the U.S. has designs for Ukraine. We're an imperialist country. I fully believe that. But you've talked about it being a color revolution. And surely the fact that the United States has designs here can't mean it's a color revolution. If that's the case, then everything everywhere is a color revolution, because you know there are State Department ghouls drafting up plans for Botswana, like, statehood one day, you know, just in case. There are people in the government doing all sorts of crazy stuff like that.
Has the debate touched on the human impact of the war, or just the US did some stuff so the Ukrainians deserve everything that Russia does to them? Yes.
It's the job of U.S. ambassadors to other countries to talk about our interests relative to
Those are all
I just need
Nazis, you
something
see.
specific. Some
They are all
CIA
Nazis, you
front
see.
that was set up in Ukraine that allowed them to funnel money. Some like evidence
All
found
of
there were
them.
like 16 SWAT SEAL teams.
Each and every one of them.
Kiev on the day of the coup.
Is a
Actually,
Nazi.
they got funneled out really quick. And here are
I
some
mean,
photos.
there were the recent there were recently documents showing the CIA's long and storied history in Ukraine.
I don't
directly
want
Yeah.
long and
funneling
storied
money
history.
directly funneling money into preferred groups
Mm.
in the lead up to 2014.
Mm.
Also, we have the leaked documents from the
phone
kid who
call.
leaked the documents that he had access to on Discord.
Okay,
um,
so the leaked
and
document. So
those
what did
show
we
that
do?
U.S. Special Forces have been active in Ukraine. So that not only are there 200 plus NEDs in Ukraine,
So what did they do?
who are giving political support and giving actual funding to
What-
the
what
U.S.
funding?
preferred groups and
Where's
doing
the
things on
funding?
ground.
Eddie, what funding? We don't have evidence of a
It's
single
money
direct
from
connection.
the NGOs, non-governmental
Which NGOs,
organizations,
Eddie?
and the NED, which was created as a private CIA cutout because it's easier for them to be clandestine about their activities,
Which
funneling money
NGOs?
into the U.S.'s preferred groups in Ukraine.
Okay, where,
Giving support to them, and that was revealed.
Where's
in
the
recent
evidence of
document
that?
showing Operation Cartel and Operation Aerodynamic?
Eddie,
This is the evidence. I'm telling you.
no, you're just
I'm
telling no,
you.
but like where? Wait, do you
This
think it's
was-
evidence
there were
when you
leaks-
say a thing
Here,
happens?
I'll literally send you the article.
Oh, God.
right now.
Please, yes. Just any evidence of like leaked financial transactions or like direct engagement, something. Because so far the only thing that you have evidence for is the fact that we wanted things in Ukraine, and we're America. We want the world, man. We want the moon. But that's not evidence of a color revolution. If a document leaked that the United States actually like really like it wanted the 2037 dissolution of Kazakhstan, and then it later happens, like you would need to connect something, you know, something direct, something material. It's called material dialectics, right?
Uh-oh.
Yes, you need.
My
You
gosh.
need to use evidence on the ground. I'm trying to find something
Anything.
specifically about money being funneled.
I know
from
link
but-
hunting takes a second during
That-
talking. Do you want to move on, and then
Right.
like if you find it, I can look at it then when you bring it
Yeah,
in?
I'll just say, have you watched the movie Ukraine on Fire? Because that's where most of the evidence about the NEDs.
Oh
and
my
the direct
God.
funneling of money
I
to
can.
different groups
I
comes
haven't. I
from.
can watch it though.
Oh my God.
Ukraine on Fire
Because
is a
I
propaganda
didn't, yeah, I
film.
didn't have any sort
Oh,
today directly
propaganda
about,
film.
NED money going directly to a group, although there are tons of specific cases. And
Jesus.
there was the leaked documents that showed Operation Aerodynamic, where the CIA was directly giving money
CIA.
to preferred groups in Ukraine in the lead up to 2014, and the recent leaked Pentagon documents that show the U.S. Special Forces were involved in Ukraine. So that's
But
a perfect
doing
example of
what?
the U.S. giving money to preferred groups in the lead up to the violent overthrow of this government. But if you watch this movie Ukraine on Fire, it'll give much more
Mhm.
evidence than that and lay out things in specific. It's very good.
Yeah, hold on. There's Oliver Stone interviewing pro-Russian figures surrounding the Revolution of Dignity, such as Viktor Yanukovych and Vladimir Putin.
Time to do some googling.
Yanukovych and Putin in a
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. They got all sorts of direct interviews with people involved. And they have that leaked phone call from
Okay.
Victoria Nuland. And oh yeah, they
You think they
have
might
here
be
a leaked
biased?
speech of Victoria Nuland where she says that we have funneled $3 million into Ukraine in the last year alone.
You think there might be
Stabilizing
bias?
politics. So she admitted that herself. So I forgot that was in this movie. So that's perfect for what you were asking.
Do you think it? Out of curiosity, if somebody like me with no preconceptions about this conflict were to watch this, and I were to see that they were bragging about interviewing Yanukovych and Putin, do you think that might maybe lead me to believe this is a biased source?
I feel like you should want to listen to the main people involved in the conflict. Like, what do we just bury our head and not listen to Putin because we think he's a bad guy?
No. What if we
or not
listen to more than
Yanukovych
just
because we
one
think he's
side?
a bad guy?
No.
They interview many pro-Ukrainian people too, right? It just interviews with Putin and Yanukovych, which is interesting because you never get that perspective. From media, they put you in an echo chamber where you don't. Hear the Russian side.
I see.
This movie allows you to hear the Ukrainian side and the Russian side, and then make your decision.
What prominent pro-Ukrainian leaders do they interview for this film?
There's Klitschko. There's a handful of the leaders of like right sector and ethno-nationalist forces. I believe there's interviews.
Oh my God! No, the dude who directed the movie worked on the Nutcracker in the City Hall.
With Poroshenko. Yeah, give it a watch. You'll learn, like for real. If you are genuinely interested in learning about this conflict, this movie is the best way.
Oh yeah.
Really? Yeah.
I can see why there were gaps in the in the timeline I got from you. It says starring Oliver Stone, of course, Vladimir Putin, Yanukovych, Vitaly Zakhar. Oh, that's tough for me to pronounce. Vitaly Zakharchenko. There we go. I hope that was okay. And Robert Earl Perry.
Robert Perry's the man, by the way.
You like?
Oh boy.
Okay, it's interesting. This starring section doesn't seem to feature. Let me see. Who's this Zakharchenko person? Previously served as Ukraine's Minister of Internal Affairs until he was suspended from his duties on the 21st of February 2014, shortly after signing a decree authorizing the use of live ammunition against protesters. None of the pro-Ukrainian people you mentioned are in the starring feature of this film. I guess I can give it a look and also listen to the guy who was ousted.
I mean, even if there wasn't, wouldn't it be interesting to hear the like we're blasted?
No, that's interesting. You know, even if there weren't.
Like even say they don't interview Poroshenko or they don't interview any Ukrainian leaders in this movie, which they do, right? Wouldn't you still want to hear from the other side?
Do you think that would be an argument in favor of like watching, say, not to compare Russia and Nazis, I'm not saying they're the same, but in terms of people I disagree with, right? There are Nazi propaganda films, and it's like, oh, well, this is the side of things they won't tell you, and that's usually because they're lying. And
True.
Right. That's not what this film is. It's very good.
Oh, very good.
Sides, and it features interviews with independent journalists as well as a plethora of sources and
Russian sources
of interviews, videos, and talks from people like Victoria Nuland, who have been, deeply involved in controlling Ukrainian politics and orchestrating the coup. So it's also it interviews and talks about and lets people who I deeply, vehemently disagree with on the pro-NATO side, it gives them a platform to talk as well. And then, like I said, it lets people make their decision. Yeah, I'm sure there's a narrative, right? The movie's clearly in favor of the idea that the U.S. Helped orchestrate a coup in 2014, because that's what the evidence on the ground shows. But it's more so that the movie just presents the evidence rather than it tries to shove this narrative down your throat. They certainly don't portray Putin in a glowing light, which I wouldn't either, obviously. So.
Yeah, I have some mild criticisms of him, I'd say, based on the little that I've learned today. I was also looking at this call between Kat and Nolan. There's quite a lot of text here. It's really hard to read and talk at the same time. Is there any content to this? Like, where do they say, like, I have, like, I have done X? It seems like a lot of this I'll just have to watch the movie on. So I feel like there should be some evidence.
The phone call's in the movie. We could play it now, but I mean,
that would take a little while.
It would be a little bit boring. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I think the guy Yachts is the guy who's got the economic experience, the government experience. What we need is Klitsch and Tiani Hook on the outside. So they're orchestrating a coup, orchestrating the violent seizure of this government by picking out their players.
Jesus.
So yeah, like we don't have to go
Okay.
into the call specifically.
Right,
Just
there's
watch the
always so
movie.
much
We
to
can
get
we can
into, right.
revisit.
I
it
can
another
watch the
time if
movie
you
as
want
well.
to. I know we've been going for a while now.
Yeah. So, well, okay. So we've talked a lot about 2014. You know, it was a great year. I was 3 years out of high school. I don't know what I was doing in 2014. But so we're in the modern day. All right. Now I hear a lot about this NATO group. Now
Yes.
I know
Very
that in the
important.
past people have said we're not going to move NATO over that far. Personally, I don't care. People say everything every direction. What I care about is what's morally right now. You know, if we listen to every promise, right, you know, I'm pretty sure that like Lincoln said, you know, we will promise you freedom from slavery, but not equality for the N-word or whatever he went on about, right? If we follow every promise ever made, it's like, well, okay, I don't know. Maybe we should reevaluate. So in terms of this NATO thing, okay?
I'm sure there's a narrative he said about the little
Some people
propaganda
said- some people
film.
said the opposite. I don't really know.
Oh God.
But countries that want to join NATO asked to join NATO. Ukraine is asked to join NATO multiple times. We keep saying no because there's an internal conflict, and that is, one of the prerequisites is that a country has to be stable in order to join NATO. Now, I guess my question is, doesn't it kind of validate the desire that Ukraine had to enter NATO that Russia would go on to invade them? Because the whole thing they wanted to be in NATO for was protection from Russia, because Russia can't invade a NATO country, obviously. That would be a...
Right. The
bad
argument
idea.
from Russia was that if Ukraine is allowed to join NATO, the U.S. is going to, and their NATO allies are going to use that as a launching point to attack us, which could escalate towards nuclear war. Now, you could, debate whether that's correct or not until Angela Merkel came out and admitted in 2014 that there was never any plans to follow Minsk agreements. The whole idea was for NATO to build up military forces and military capacity in Ukraine with the explicit purpose of threatening and attacking Russia.
Wait, what does that
So
have to
the
do with
explicit
Minsk?
purpose, according to NATO leaders, was to build up military capacity and attack Russia.
So
it's perfectly reasonable for Russia to say that's a red line.
well-
If Ukraine joins NATO, we're going to do something.
So
'cause
let's-
we know that means attack for us, which Joe Biden himself, like I said, not that we have to believe everything he says, but he himself said that he knows this. If NATO moves eastward anymore, we're going to provoke a potential nuclear war.
so
with
yeah,
Russia.
let's
This
talk.
would be catastrophic. I think we both agree.
Right. Well, it's just obviously we can debate whether or not Ukraine being part of NATO would work as a staging ground to attack Russia, which seems like a dumb thing
We
to
don't
do.
have to debate that because Angela Merkel admitted it, right?
Okay.
The leaders of NATO admitted this. They said it was just a way to attack Russia.
So wait,
and
wait,
that-
we'll get to that.
fits
I'm going to ask.
perfectly with
I'm leading
what
into
was
that.
going on.
The-
with the
the-
NATO, the training up of NATO troops right on Russia's
Right,
border.
we'll get into that. So a couple of things. First of all, Russia did invade Ukraine, so that side
True.
of the thing is kind of settled. It's really ambiguous whether, like, you could argue we would have gone into Russia, but like we know Russia did go into Ukraine, so that's settled. So the desire for Ukraine to join NATO, like that is at least from Ukraine's perspective, that's a solid thing to get at right there. I can't blame them for wanting that, especially in retrospect. But the thing, okay, so this Merkel thing, you said there was never an intention to follow the Minsk agreements, something NATO troops into Ukraine, which confused me. The Minsk Accords were an unsuccessful attempt, there were two, to stop the fighting between the Russian-backed separatists and Ukraine's government. But what does that have to do with putting NATO troops into Ukraine? We couldn't move troops into Ukraine. They weren't a part of NATO. Like, if we weren't following... If Ukraine and Russia kept fighting, it would prolong the conflict that prevented Ukraine from entering NATO. How does
So
that
they
make
don't
sense?
actually have to be a part of NATO to train up troops. So what was
True.
going on?
Nobody.
was the Minsk
You're
Accords
right, Connor. Yeah.
were framed as a peace agreement, a way to end the fighting. But as Angela Merkel has now showed us, it was not. It was a way for NATO to build up military capacity. So despite not adding Ukraine to NATO, they were training up troops right on Russia's border, thousands of troops to be NATO interoperable, which means those troops can go anywhere in the earth where NATO troops are stationed, and they can work together. They can be in the same battalion. They're
We don't
trained
have
up to
NATO
NATO
troops in
standards,
Ukraine.
which is very high standards. So Russia then began, lining up troops along their border.
Wait,
And
how many
so
NATO troops do
despite
we have in Ukraine?
So the point is, I just want to be clear here. My point is, despite Ukraine not being added
Do you
to
have a
NATO,
point?
NATO was still building up military capacity in Ukraine. And the point of that was to eventually attack Russia
Wait.
and eventually probably add Ukraine to NATO, which they kept floating
Wait, how
the idea
many
of doing. But
how many NATO troops did we have in Ukraine?
1
it was
million
thousands.
billion.
not NATO troops, sorry. they were training Ukrainian troops to be NATO interoperable.
Okay,
so that
well,
they
wait.
could launch military operations alongside NATO, which, as Angela Merkel said, would give them the ability to
Okay,
attack
it's
Russia.
a very different.
Use Ukraine alongside NATO troops
So
to
hold,
attack.
okay, so hold on. This doesn't make sense in a couple of levels. First of all, every country in the world, with the exception of those that don't like NATO, want NATO troops training their troops because we're NATO. I mean, we're the U.S., right? We're the best.
I don't think every country in the world. I don't think Russia and China want that.
No, except for countries who don't like NATO. I mean, like, if you're not ideologically aligned against the United
I would say
States,
most of the
NATO,
world doesn't like NATO anymore after what they've been seeing.
you can litigate that
going on
if you like,
recently
but
in
there's no
Ukraine.
denying our military capabilities, right? We certainly have well-trained, well-armed soldiers. That's not a moral
Yes,
statement.
which
I'm
is
just
why
talking about
Russia
our
was
money.
threatened by
Right.
that NATO training.
So, okay. So NATO training Ukrainian troops. The reason that Ukrainian troops were being trained was because somebody started a war in the Donbass, and Ukraine, because it's a poor, at least it was a poor country, didn't have soldiers to fight against it. That's one of the reasons the Azov battalion grew to the prominence that it did. You have these like ultra-nationalist, like blood and soil types who form militias because Ukraine literally has no organized military to fight in the Donbass. Now, obviously, that doesn't make what they're doing right. I mean, I'm glad they're fighting against Russian aggression, but I don't agree with them being ethno-nationalists.
Do you really think the people
So-
of the Donbass were like about to like march into Western Ukraine and start attacking them?
No, I think they were trying to secede with East Ukraine, which they did. That's what they tried to do. They had
Right.
Yeah.
So you just said that these groups didn't have a lot of power in Ukraine, these ethno-nationalist groups, but they were able to seize hold of the Ukrainian government. Clearly, they had a lot of power.
no,
and
they were
influence
able
in the
to
country.
seize
And
buildings.
then there,
Wait,
they did
you're
march
doing it
towards
again.
Eastern
We've
Ukraine
gone over
and
these
began
points.
shelling the homes. It was
My God.
absolutely Western
Wait,
Ukraine. and
we've gone over these
specifically
points.
The U.S.
No,
ethno-nationalists
We're
who were
backsliding.
being offensive towards Eastern Ukraine.
We're backsliding.
Right?
No.
So you're making it seem like they were defending.
Stop
themselves,
reading.
like the Azov. are
You're
defending
reading
themselves.
chat. I can see your pupils, man. Every time you talk
look
at
at what
length, you
I'm
go
looking
up and to
at.
the right.
Look at what I'm looking at.
Oh,
Yeah,
room tour.
that is literally a tick that I have when I'm thinking. Look,
Are you
there's
accusing me of being
maps.
ableist?
Look, there's maps up there. Do you think that's what I'm using?
Do you think
What do you think
looking
I'm
at
reading from?
looking at the
man?
people of
Like,
Africa and their
what chat? Look, I
anti-colonial
don't even
spirit
have
gives you
chat up.
strength?
Look,
Hey, what's up?
I have this
I was waving at
article from Consortium News about there's Ukrainians marching with Stepan Bandera, and then there's you. Where's the script, Vaush? Where's the
Vaush.
script that
I'm
I'm
kind of
reading
taken
off
aback
I
by
can't
seeing
seem to
myself
find
there.
it. I wish I had.
I'll just assume you quickly closed it. We visited a lot of
You
these
can think
points.
whatever you want.
We were talking about.
I just know this issue well because I've actually read about it.
Oh
a lot
yeah.
about it today. This is my education.
That's good.
So we don't want to relitigate here. We were talking about like NATO troops in Ukraine. It seems like there was a pretty good reason for the Ukrainian government to want their troops being trained up because of the whole
Oh my God.
war in the Donbass thing. So I want to know what was this plan to invade Russia? You said from Merkel, right? Merkel.
Yes, the
if I
plan
Google
was to build
Merkel
up NATO capacity, military capacity in Ukraine,
invade
so it
Russia.
could be used to launch an attack against Russia, or even just to provoke and threaten Russia and contain Russia. Like the U.S. right now is surrounding China with their military bases to try and
China's
countries,
completely
and
encircled.
trying to
it's
control
true.
countries around China, like Thailand, so that they can contain China, so that they can stop China from growing as an economic superpower. Which gets to the point of what this whole thing is about: is the U.S. doesn't want Russia to reassert themselves as a superpower after they essentially broke the Soviet Union in 1991.
Yes, I know that the U.S. deeply fears Russian economic hegemony. Hold on, I'm reading this.
Right. So
Merkel
the idea
thing.
was to build up NATO capacity in the region, so that they had a foothold, a essentially neo-colonial outpost in Ukraine, which they could use to attack Russia.
Right. Okay, I'm trying to find that though. Hold on.
And I don't agree that the Ukrainian citizens would want to become part of NATO, because I think they're smart enough to know what that means. They're smart enough to know the target that puts on them from Russia, who have repeatedly in the lead up to 2014 said that adding Ukraine to NATO is a red line, right? We'll take that as an act of aggression and a threat towards us.
Wait, I can't. I can't.
So I think the
find-
people
Isn't he
of Ukraine
far gone?
that becoming part of NATO would put a target on them.
I can't find the thing where she says that we're planning to attack Russia. Can you find that? What do I need to Google to find that? That's pretty important.
I'm sure I have it.
Because
Here,
my
1 sec.
perspective is that it'd be pretty dumb to attack Russia for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's broke. It's not like there are much in the way of material wealth to seize apart from your natural resources. Second, it would prompt the end of the world. That's not good. I've noted that on my notes, and it says that the end of the world.
That's
would be a
why
bad
it's so
thing.
fucking insane, dude. That's why I'm so against this war and why I talk about it so
Me
much.
too.
Because they're literally provoking World War III. They're provoking nuclear destruction for all of us. That's why Merkel's
should stop.
statements were so insane. That's
True.
why it was such a bomb.
Find me those statements, please, where she said that they were planning to attack Russia.
Yeah, hopefully I have it in my notes here.
I hope so too. Seeing Merkel invade Russia, war Russia. Merkel interview Russia. It's a Washington Post article. I'll never give those freaks my money.
So I got 2.
Somebody in my chat just said that I won't find it because it didn't happen. But you'll prove them wrong, right?
Here you go.
Okay.
There's an article from Patrick Lawrence on. I sent it to you on Zoom. That explains
Oh,
Merkel's revelations, which
revolution.
a further escalation of the hostilities with Russia.
All right, hold on. Hold on. Consortium news. Bias.
I sent it to you in the chat.
I see.
there,
I see.
believe.
Yeah, I just want to see on the reliability scale. Let's see.
What's the reliability scale? Does that tell you how good sources are?
Oh, well,
How do you know that that's reliable?
Well, you know, there's always going to be like that biased chain effect, but sometimes it's pretty easy to tell, right? Like Alex Jones or something. Stop clicking.
Fair enough.
Oh, this one says it has an extreme left bias with mostly factual reporting. Well, I consider myself extremely on the left. I'm extreme. Let's go.
It's a great outlet. I recommend anybody follow it. It's one of the main ways that I keep up to date with what's going on in the world.
Okay, let's see. Interviews.
It was founded by Robert Perry, actually, who we discussed earlier, and who's in that movie Ukraine on Fire.
I'm sure I would like him a lot in that movie. Hold on, Merkel's comment.
Oh my god.
Sorry, just a moment. This seems pretty important, so I want to cover it. Merkel's interviews with Der Spiegel. Oh, that's not a good look, being German. Right off the bat. Ukraine conflict, something. Merkel described the Minsk talks as an attempt to give Ukraine time to become stronger. Okay. There are various interpretations of Minsk's remarks. They are generally taken at face value as an offhandedly delivered admission of her duplicity in her dealings with Russia on the Ukraine situation. Wait, that's it? Her saying the Minsk agreements would give Ukraine more time to fortify? Wait. Where's Russia here?
Right. So the Minsk agreements were intended and framed as a peace agreement that was going to end conflict with Russia.
Where's
and
the
Merkel
invading?
is saying that Ukraine was building up military capacity.
Where's the...
So, in other words, Ukraine has no right to build its military capacity. Ukraine does not have a right to have a military because, as we've discussed before, Ukraine is just a pawn in a game, and Ukraine actually building a military it's forbidden. It's like an escalation against Russia to actually have an army, right? Trying to convince someone that is this unbiased source.
Thing about invading Russia, though.
They were
Building up Ukraine.
I'm not sure if she explicitly said, I guess we're going to invade Russia, but that's kind of implied in the fact that the Minsk agreements, like I said, were framed as this is going to bring peace. This is going to bring peace between Ukraine and Russia. And then Merkel said, no, it was just a way for us to build up military capacity, meaning NATO military capacity.
Where does she
Oh.
say
So
NATO
I
military
guess I
capacity?
made a mistake in saying she said we're explicitly going to attack Russia, but that's implied because like I said, Russia had said
Implied.
times more NATO capacity in Ukraine is a threat to us, and that's a red line, and
Where-
it's going to
where
push
does
us
she-
closer to nuclear war.
Where does she say NATO?
Russia says our neighbor being able to defend themselves is like a red line for us. Ukraine shouldn't be able to defend them. That's a red line. Oh boy. Cutscene.
The feel of bones crunching beneath your feet is confirmation of your awesome victory.
True. That is true. Awesome victory. Awesome victory.
The time has come for you to seize control of the orcish hordes for yourself. Black Cat has become foolish in the deployment of his personal troops and has left an opening that you can now exploit. A key outpost in the Black Morass is the core of Black Cat's supply lines, not only to his foremost battle groups, but to his castle at Black Rock Spire as well. The complete destruction of this outpost will disrupt his power base long enough for you to secure his overthrow.
Damn. Full on giggling. Look at Patrick Lehrer's articles of news, and the second one down, the US Soviet-style president talking about Biden.
NATO's
Debate.
military capacity. It looks like she's talking about the Minsk Accords giving Ukraine time to fortify, which
True.
you know it didn't because the separatists violated it like immediately. So it didn't even do that. So where are we? Okay,
Where are we?
did you lie to me? I don't see. Where's the mention of building up NATO troops or invading Russia? That was a pretty big thing. You predicated the entire legitimacy of Russia's act of purported self-defense on the idea that NATO has
Thank you.
admitted that it has plans to build up troop capacities and use Ukraine as a
and
staging
NATO
ground.
was literally training troops, thousands of troops on
So
their
you don't.
border
So
at
you
this time.
lied. This doesn't
what
say that at
capacity-
all.
What military capacity did you fucking think that Merkel was talking about? Germany's a NATO
Ukraine.
member country. Obviously, she's referring to NATO's military
It's a
capacity in
conflict
Ukraine as they're
between
training NATO
Russia-
troops on Russia's border.
It's a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. She obviously
We
is saying.
all know it's more than that. We all
Oh
know
my
it's a conflict
God, you're
between
deep.
We all know it's a conflict between NATO and
You're
Russia.
in deep.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so you completely lied about this. You said that she said that they were going to
No.
invade Russia, and it doesn't even mention NATO troop capacity. And the only evidence you have is that, well, read between the lines.
Honestly, at least from the titles, this guy is all over the political spectrum. The only relatively consistent thing is a general anti-American sentiment, and honestly, I'm not gonna blame him.
Obviously, she means the Minsk Accords that were violated 8 seconds after they were passed would give NATO, the strongest military alliance on Earth, the time to defend itself against Russia. Okay. Wow, I can see why Russia rushed to invade Ukraine up the back of evidence like this. Clearly, they had no choice with the immeasurable threat levied at their doors.
Imagine if this was happening in Mexico. If Wagner Group was training up troops right on the border of Mexico and the U.S. And then there was a peace agreement that said
Jesus.
Mexico was going to demilitarize and we were going to have peace and Russia was not going to be involved in Mexico.
What?
And then 7 years later, we found out that Russia was continuing to train up troops in Mexico. And Russia said, guess what?
Wait.
We never planned to follow the peace agreement. We were just going to keep building up troops.
Wait, hold on. Wait.
Don't you think that would imply that they were building up
Jesus.
troops to threaten, contain, or attack?
No,
Pain.
there's no relationship
Right.
between the NATO troop training and what she's saying about the Minsk Accords. The reason she's saying this about the Minsk Accords is because she didn't
She's
think
a
Russia would
NATO
follow
leader.
them.
As NATO
She's,
is
no,
training
you
up
are
troops in
reaching
Russia,
so
and she's
hard.
saying we're
You
going
were
to
like,
build
yeah,
up
she
military
admitted she would
capacity in
invade
Ukraine.
Russia. And
What
then I look
fucking
at this
military do you
article
think
and
she's
you're like,
talking about if not NATO?
Ukraine.
What military do you think she's
Ukraine,
talking about if not NATO?
the country that was in the war, Ukraine.
that was being
that one.
trained up directly by NATO.
Yeah, that's not a secret,
Ukraine's
obviously.
Ukraine is essentially a puppet of the U.S. and NATO.
Wait.
Oh yeah.
Wait,
They
don't
don't
run away
have
from the
any
point.
military
You
forces
completely
other
lied
than the
about this,
ethno
man.
nationalists.
I am so
No,
happy I asked you for
you're
this
trying to
article.
distort it 'cause
No,
you think
you're
you
and
have a
now you're
gotcha
talking
here,
fast
and
because you
don't.
know that you
think
were
have
caught
a gotcha
lying.
here and you don't.
You know you were
Because
caught
Angela
lying.
Merkel was talking about building up NATO capacity.
Where in this
military
article?
capacity.
Wait, can you control?
Okay,
I'm
so
control
who was she
effing.
talking
Can you
about?
find it?
Who is she talking about if not NATO and you know,
Ukraine. Listen to the
NATO's
quote.
preferred
Listen to
forces
the
in
quote.
Ukraine?
Okay, listen. I'm going to read it out loud, and we're going to see. Okay, listen. This is from Der Spiegel. She believes she is Merkel, by the way. She believes that later during the Minsk talks, she was able to buy the time Ukraine,
True.
I spoke that one louder just so that it was clear, needed to better fend off the Russian attack. She says this is also Ukraine, is now a strong, well-fortified country. Back then, she is certain that's Ukraine, would have been overrun by Putin's troops. Any reading of this that involves, we prompted bad faith peace talks so NATO could build troops it's incoherent to begin with, because NATO can train outside of Ukraine, and we also don't need Ukraine as a staging ground. We have the Baltic states, 3 of them, that hate Russia right there. And Alaska, I guess, if we really wanted to, Alaska. But no, clearly by this, she meant that and now Finland, we would need NATO to have more time?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to deny that NATO building up troop capacity right on Russia's border isn't an act of aggression because the U.S. NATO's troops stationed in the Baltic states.
Because Ukraine having an army is forbidden.
Act like a phony peace agreement that they admittedly said was just to allow them to continue building up their military in Ukraine, which Russia constantly said was a red line.
I'm sipping the
If you
Kool-Aid.
really want to act that naive and act like NATO wasn't threatening Russia with that,
you,
and like Merkel
you
wasn't
didn't
talking
remember
about
what this
building
article
NATO
said at all.
capacity.
Was
If you want to act like the Western imperialist countries in NATO,
was your
were only
memory of this
concerned with
article
building up Ukraine so
the
they could
Ukraine
defend
on
themselves,
Fire
the great liberal
documentary?
democracy of Ukraine.
Was
If
wait,
you
wait,
wanna
wait,
be that
wait,
naive,
wait.
that's
Do they
fine.
mention this in the
That's fine.
Ukraine
I
on
don't think
Fire?
I'm going to get through to you if that's how naive you're
Do
going to
they
be about
mention this in
issue.
Ukraine on
If
Fire?
you don't think that NATO was building up capacity to threaten and contain Russia, I mean, try putting the.
Oh,
How
yeah.
many? I'm sorry. Wait. How many
Imagine
NATO?
Russia was doing
How many
this in
NATO
Mexico.
troops did we have in
Imagine
total?
Russia was
Wait,
doing
wait,
this in
Eddie,
Mexico.
you're jibber jabbering.
Would you
You're
not
running away.
consider that
You're
a
running. You're
threat?
gish galloping. But it's okay. We need to come back down to.
Famous in an aggressive state,
NATO
Russia.
troops do you think we had in
True.
2014. That
True.
you think Angela Merkel is saying the sole reason of a quote-unquote phony peace deal between a war that is exclusively being fought between Russia and Ukraine is actually a time for...
The big plus of me using a camera is that you can actually see my facial expressions now. Isn't that a plus? You can actually... God.
for us, the largest military alliance on Earth in history, to build up our forces. What do you think?
How
what-
many did?
What,
How many?
what do you think?
No, it wasn't a way to
hey,
build
we
up
need
our forces, it was to
10,000
build
more
up our forces
ICBMs?
in Ukraine, which until 1991 was part of the Soviet Union, so we weren't allowed there, right? I mean, we did.
Why
did
why do we need
underhandedly.
Ukraine as a
But they were
staging
only-
ground? We have the Baltic states.
Because Ukraine
With
is
Serbia
everything.
is a buffer also, who's more pro-Russia, but I mean, because Ukraine is right on the border.
no,
There's
if
if you look
the
at a map,
the
there's
Baltic-
no better way to attack
No,
Russia
no,
than
not
through Ukraine.
Balkan, Baltic states, Estonia,
Balkan.
Latvia.
Oh, sorry. I got
Poland.
you. Those tiny. Ukraine is a much larger.
It's
country
hundreds
than
of
them, for
miles of
one.
border shared with Russia. Why do we don't need a shared border to stage a fight with Russia?
Okay,
We're
so-
both
okay, yeah,
nuclear
just attack-
countries.
Oh, hey, come on. Poland is that tiny compared to Ukraine. That's stupid.
Russia through Estonia.
No, we
Then
don't
the
want to
Estonian
attack
army
Russia.
there.
There's no plan to attack
NATO,
Russia.
Have NATO attack Russia.
There's
through
no plan to
Estonia and
attack
see how well that
Russia.
goes.
It
You're
would be
seriously
nuclear
acting like you
annihilation.
don't understand the geopolitical significance of
Of
controlling
nuclear
Ukraine.
war?
Are
The
you really
only
gonna play
one who
dumb
talks
and
lightly
pretend that
about
you don't know
nuclear
the
war is
geopolitical
Russia.
significance for the U.S. to control and NATO to control Ukraine? Are we going to be that?
Can you, okay, really
that
quickly, out of
naive?
curiosity, how would NATO stage an invasion of Russia without prompting global thermonuclear war?
I don't know. That's why
Oh.
it's so disgusting.
whoops,
to
that's why your butt's out. Wait, hold on.
It would.
He's not gonna stop
because
talking while I
Russia
put them
says
back
if
in.
there's an
There we go.
existential threat to the Russian state, they're going to use nukes.
Okay,
it
so-
would push us towards nuclear war.
Okay,
and
so wait.
apparently the people in charge of our government still don't care.
Quick
'Cause
follow-up.
They continue
Quick-
to provoke.
hey, quick
they
follow-up.
continue to sanction. They
Quick-
continue.
Also, if you're enjoying the stream, consider throwing a donation my way. Throw a donation my way. There's a 100% a plan to attack Russia, but there is a plan to attack everyone.
Quick
Dump
follow-up.
weapons.
Eddie. Okay, so
Ed and Eddie.
know a way that we would do war with Russia without ending Western capitalism in nuclear fire, why would we do it?
I don't know.
Because
The people who run our government and run NATO are sadistic. They're doing it right now.
sadistic.
They're doing
Oh
it
my
right
God!
now. By
Nothing.
continu-
Your conspiracy theory doesn't even have a
You're
narrative.
saying that
9/11
you're saying that
conspiracy
the
theorists
fact
have
that
better
this might
narratives than
escalate
this.
us to nuclear war
Yeah,
proves that
yeah.
the Western,
They
the
needed
Western
a
powers would
4-second
They're just sadistic.
peace deal
They'll
to
do
build up
anything to
troops.
protect
We only
imperialism.
had 4 billion trillion troops and all the military might in the world, but we needed 5 extra seconds to defend against our so we could build up against Russia. And we already had the Baltic states, but we needed Ukraine
you're
as
saying
well.
the US
And our
is just
plan
so
for doing
powerful
this
they can-
was to give a 4-second Minsk
We're ignoring
agreement.
the geopolitical significance of Ukraine.
Wait, guys, if
You
we
can
can
laugh all
just
you
oust
want.
Yanukovych, we can finish our Star Wars anti-ICBM nuclear laser beam.
True.
What the?
Yeah.
No. Well, listen. I'll tell you,
Have fun
man. I didn't know I was
have
arguing
fun
against.
attacking Russia through Latvia.
I didn't
and
realize I
Estonia.
was
Completely
arguing with a
ignore
NATO
the
fan. You have more
geopolitical and
faith in
strategic
NATO than I
military
do.
Significance of the country of Ukraine.
You're like the biggest NATO fan I've ever talked to. You're like, yeah, NATO is actually capable of amassing the military might in order to single-handedly defeat Russia. And that's why they had no choice but to defend themselves by invading Ukraine and crippling their economy doing it, leaving open Finland and the Baltic states and also the rest of the world. And also ICBMs don't need a shared border. What? Okay. No. It's fine. So how's your day been?
It's been all right.
Mine has too. I talked about Tears of the Kingdom, right?
You have
Tears of the Kingdom.
Zelda.
I talked about
Oh,
at the
yeah.
beginning.
Did you figure out your stuffy nose issue? Did you get some neti pot going?
No, I don't own a neti pot. It feels like it'd
Dude,
be so
you gotta
cringe to
invest
use
in
it.
one.
Yeah. Like a cute porcelain one like my grandma used to have.
Yeah, they're legit. They work. They
What?
do.
Why can't we all just get along? Is my question.
We got to debate these important issues. Like we said, NATO and the U.S. are pushing us towards
Jesus.
World War III and a global conflict with Russia.
Oh, that
We gotta
talking
keep
point.
these things out, even if we have disagreements on them.
Oh yeah.
Very important.
I actually
World
think we're
War-
stopping World War III.
How is that?
Do you want me to answer sincerely, or do you want me to take the same like disaffected, I'm pretending I don't know as much as I do tone that I have for the entire conversation?
Just your real argument or your real opinion.
I don't think that Putin is a rational actor. For the most part, I think leaders tend to be. I think North Korea, you could say, rationally acted. I think that their strategy of provoking conflict unnecessarily is actually an effective deterrent to regional conflict. I don't think Putin is, though. He is an authoritarian leader. He is, after all, pretty much singly in control of the country. And he doesn't come across as a very stable person to me. Smart, but not stable. A lot of machismo going on in that guy's brain. I don't know if the rumors say his cancer is dying. I don't know if those are true at all. But I think
It's not true.
Well, I mean, we don't know. I don't think they're true, but
True, I guess.
Okay.
No.
I think that authoritarian leaders just have a tendency to
If you want me to stream any Switch games, then consider, you know the drill. You know the drill. Consider throwing a dono my way.
expansionist and militaristic. He made blood and soil arguments when he gave his televised speech regarding the invasion of Ukraine when
Yep.
the 3-day special military operation
I
began.
remember that.
I think that he needs to be ousted. I think he's a threat to the world. I think
Yeah.
that under him, the Kremlin
I
has
agree.
escalated its constant threats of nuclear
agree.
conflict, even before the war with Ukraine. And that the only thing that we can do right now is provoke conditions that lead to him being ousted so that a more sane, probably still bad, but still more sane oligarch
agree.
in Russia can take power. I mean, hopefully they can have a democracy again. I think that'd be great,
That would be awesome.
transformative thing, but realistically, even a better oligarch. And him humiliating himself with this conflict in Ukraine, I think is our best bet. I think if we didn't help Ukraine, if we
There's
let him
hope.
just wash over Ukraine, which he would have if there was no help given to Ukraine, that he would just be up against even more NATO countries and things would just escalate and escalate because he's not a rational actor and he would provoke and provoke. And that, I think, that's like the real World War III threat. So my hope is that he gets ousted before then, and then we can all live in peace. Apart from that, I don't give a shit. I don't care if Russia has its own economic hegemon. I don't care if they keep the Kazakhstan and the Stans and the Belarus or whatever. I don't, their business is theirs. They're their own country. But in this specific respect, like this degree of...
I do care if they keep Belarus, okay? I do care if Russia keeps Belarus, because I do care about Belarus, you know? Belarus is a puppet state of Russia, just like Poland used to be. So I do care about that,
Bloodthirsty imperialism.
you
I
know?
think this needs to be held down. And I think this is the best way of doing it.
I think if
I mean, Belarus is part of that bloodthirsty imperialism. Like, we cannot pretend it's not.
use the word authoritarian abstractly like that, and this is a huge
Abstractly.
propaganda tool of the State Department when they're trying to overthrow a country, you could pretty much justify the overthrow of any leader, right? Just say that they're authoritarian and they're not a rational actor, and they need to be ousted. And then
Well,
I
I
would
am
also
an
say I think
anarchist.
you're underestimating the strategy of Putin. I think he is in a conflict with all of the NATO countries, like you mentioned, because all of the NATO countries are funneling money and arms into this conflict now, to which I think NATO sees as an existential conflict with Russia, and Russia sees it the same way. So by doing that, the NATO countries are already running out of arms and weapons. So Russia
really
is
think
achieving
that?
what one of their main goals of the special military operation has always been, which is the demilitarization of not only Ukraine, but also the whole of NATO and the entirety of the West. They're basically expending their military industrial base. Brian Berletic of the New Atlas was talking about this on his show today. I recommend people check that out, talking about how the West funds and the capacity that they have to continue sending weapons into this conflict is dwindling, which has been Russia's goal from the start, more so than the seizure of territory. If you don't think that's true, that's fine, but we'll see in the coming days as the NATO countries start to run out of money.
Doesn't that mean
and as the conflict starts to come to an end? Because we're now reaching a conclusion where Russia's not going to get everything they want. I think Zelensky will probably still be allowed to stay in power. But largely we'll see the demilitarization of Ukraine and its blow to NATO and the weakening of their industrial military.
This is
Okay, were you one of those people back in February of 2020?
Sorry, what?
Were you one of those people right before the war, right before the war began in Ukraine, who was saying Russia's not going to invade, State Department is being hysterical, all the Western media is freaking out, and you were saying like, haha, they all want to provoke war with Russia with this constant posturing, and then the war did begin, and you never like apologized for it. You were like, oh, well, actually, it's not a war. They're just responding to defensive action. Like, you're one of those people who will never recognize reality.
So this is
right?
this is actually what happened.
Like, you're in a different world.
No.
Yes.
So what I said was Russia's going to launch a special military operation just to protect the Donbass, and then the West will portray it as an intervention, right? And they'll say that Russia
is
invaded. That was my coverage before the war, because Russia was lining up troops on the border of Ukraine. It looked like they were going to go in. Right now, it's saying they're just going to go in and secure the places in the Donbass, make sure that people stop having their homes.
Oh my God.
Now, clearly, since that point, it's escalated into a full scale.
Yes, they've been very successful in reducing the death and destruction.
And I've been honest about that point, and I said I got that wrong. Right? It's fair to call what Russia's done an invasion, right? It's fair to call it an intervention. And before the war, they were only going to do this small little military operation. It's been far more extensive than I could have predicted, and I was honest about that.
Protecting all the ethnic Russian speakers on the road from Belarus to Kiev, of course, the road where all the ethnic Russian speakers are known to be. I just when you say stuff like NATO is running out of money, stuff like that makes me wonder if
not money per se.
Political
the
will?
West has a lot of money because the West in their current imperialist state is a financial oligarchy. But what they don't have is the same kind of manufacturing base that can be used to produce weapons of war that Russia and China has. And the U.S. for years
not true.
has been involved in all these smaller conflicts like Iraq, Yemen, Syria, all around the globe. And that is what our military and NATO's military is built for, is maintaining a bunch of smaller conflicts all around the world. They're not built to, for a long, sustained, maintained conflict between another superpower like what the war in Ukraine is evolving into. So yes, the NATO's manufacturing base and their ability to produce weapons is being depleted.
This is what I mean,
and that's going to become more obvious.
Not being in touch with reality.
This is what I mean about reality. Like, Russia was running out of fuel in their invasion like 2 weeks in. The reason they
See,
still
the
have so
Western
many
media,
artillery...
though, has been
No,
saying
wait,
this
wait,
stuff.
let
They
me
said
let me
that
finish.
Wagner
Let me
Group
come
has
on,
been
come
fighting
on.
with
Let me
shovels,
finish.
and
Let me
the Wagner
finish.
Group
Let me
just took
finish.
Bakhmut.
Let me finish. They didn't. First of all, they're lying. Second of all, the leader of the Wagner Group just threatened, just a little while ago, threatened to sell out Russian troop positions in his beef with the head of the Russian military leader. I really wouldn't be claiming that guy. Listen, the reason
How
why
does that
Russia
work?
has been
No,
able...
that's Western. You know
No,
there are Western
you
sources
know the
reporting that
reason
Bakhmut
why
fell, right?
we're
It's
both
not just like
we're
Kremlin
both
propaganda.
Western sources. The reason why Russia has been able to continue supplying artillery shells is because the Soviet Union overproduced back during its heyday. They're emptying out storehouses. It's not modern productive capacity. This isn't even a secret. You can ask, like, you can look, where are these supplies coming from? It's like, oh yeah, well, these are like, what is it, 144 millimeter? I forget the exact size. Like, we just have a million, billion, trillion of these shells because, you know, we made a lot of them. We keep them in warehouses. Over here in America, like, obviously, we don't keep giant stockpiles of old munitions. That's the reason why with stuff we've spent over to Ukraine is so expensive. Because it's newer hardware. And by newer hardware, I mean 1990s.
We're not prepared for a sustained conflict like
There
this.
is
like
no
Russia
sustained
is.
conflict. It would end the world. There is no war anymore. There's no war between Russia and the West. Neither side has a way of stopping the nukes from falling. This isn't...
You think nuclear war is inevitable at this point?
I think that it would take a remarkable amount of discipline and planning to prevent it. But with Russia specifically, I think the best thing that we can hope for is Putin being ousted. They can maintain antagonistic relations with the West if they want. It's Putin specifically who I think is instigating the worst of this escalation. There is no nuclear
I'm not
war
sure if
that
I agree.
NATO will instigate.
I
You know
think
why?
Putin is just
Because
a
NATO
symptom
isn't run by
of a
bloodthirsty
system.
lunatics. NATO is run by thousands and thousands of soulless bureaucrats, puppet men dressed up by those oligarchs that you hate so much. This is neoliberalism, okay? This isn't the same kind of system. We don't have one guy making all these decisions. We have thousands of committees that argue with each other and never get anything done. And all of these committees are centrally focused on maintaining Western imperial hegemony, which, mind you, nuclear war would not help with. We have no interest in nuclear war with Russia.
That's the thing, is they're so committed to maintaining this hegemony that they will push us to the brink of, or even over the brink of, nuclear war in order to protect that hegemony. And these groups of people running NATO and both political parties in the U.S. are neocons. Neocons are running the show now.
Russia isn't a
in
threat
both parties
to our economic hegemony. Russia has less GDP than Texas. China is a threat to our economic hegemony.
China's a bigger threat than Russia, but
no,
Russia
is no. Russia's
been,
nothing.
Since
Russia's
1991,
GDP.
when the U.S. broke Russia's back, they have rebuilt themselves, and Putin has cracked down on the oligarchs and said that you guys you can still,
because he's
run
the top
country
oligarch
and be oligarchs, but you need to invest in Russia. You need to invest in our industrial base. They built up their industrial base. They've nationalized.
You're literally
certain
talking
energy
about
companies,
fascism right now.
which
you
were
know
trading
that, right?
with Europe, which is why the U.S. blew up Nord Stream. But Russia has
you are
rebuilt
literally
their economic base since
you are
1991,
talking
and the
right
West
now
can't have that.
about
And the West is
you
willing
are
to push us towards the brink of
the
nuclear
idea
war.
that
Can I
West
finish my
no because you've said so many incorrect things. The idea that the
said
West
so I let
the
you,
idea
I let
that
you
the
spout
West
literally mainstream media, Western propaganda.
Wait, can I say one quick thing? One quick thing.
And now I can't
one quick
respond
thing.
and explain
Ed,
what's
Ed,
actually going
one quick
on
thing.
here.
The
Where NATO
difference-
is trying to destroy
the difference-
Russia's industrial
the
base.
difference
They're mad
between-
that Russia's
Ed,
rebuilding themselves.
Eddie,
Becoming
me
an
talking
economic
for a while
superpower,
and
they're
you
willing
talking
to push
for a
us to the
while.
brink of
Ed,
nuclear
you're so
war to maintain
insecure
their
about
hegemony.
your points.
That's NATO pushing
Ed,
us there. That's
Ed,
not Russia.
You're so
Russia only
insecure.
has
Oh my
two
God,
situations in which
Ed,
they'll use
Ed,
nukes.
it's over. No performance now will make anyone think you did well in the first 9/10 of this conversation.
True.
Okay? The most
can
you can
say
hope
that
for is
all you
healthy
want,
reconciliation.
But I'm going to gain so many
Ed,
followers and subscribers from this debate, just like every time we interact, because every time we interact, people see that I'm an honest actor and you are full of shit,
Ed,
and you always end up in the pro-NATO, pro-imperialist
That's because
position.
Ed, this is the
no
first
matter
time
what
we've
it is,
interacted.
It's always this enemy country of the U.S.
Wait,
is
Ed,
bad
so
and
you're
deserves
saying
to be ousted.
you're saying
They're
that you're authentic, but you're
right?
admitting it's a clout shark?
Good. NATO is run by rational bureaucrats.
An authentic
So you're
clout
admitting
shark.
that it's a
always-
clout shark, but
always
you
find a
see
way to
he
fall in
knows
the
he knows that he's
pro-NATO,
lost, so he literally
anti-Russia
will
position,
not stop
or the
talking
US
now.
enemy position.
Ed,
It's the
you
same with
won't
the war
stop
in
talking because
Yugoslavia.
you know every moment I speak, I sound more rational than you. You've admitted you're a clout shark. You have no investment in this besides the clout it gives you, and you earn your audience. I know that you lie. What you don't understand is that I don't have to. and I feel confident about my points, which is why I shut
That is
up.
an inversion of reality.
Ah.
That is an
Well, Keith, good luck. Good luck. You said every time you brought a source, every time you brought a source to there, it showed that you lied. Every time you brought a source, you were wrong about it.
Loving it. I have a feeling it will end soon, though.
Showed
fighting with
that
shovels
you
and these
lied.
ridiculous Western talking
Jibber
points that
jabber. He
nobody with a brain
talks
believes.
because he understands. He knows every source you brought didn't say what you said it did. You were coping for 10 minutes after that Merkel thing. You have nothing. But one day, hopefully, you will realize that you can't live a life on lying for clout. And when that happens, I will be far more willing to accept you and reconcile
So to contact this guy's dimension.
with me. Okay? Good luck, my
that's
dude.
so funny.
Good luck.
Oh, it's about to end.
Somebody's a clout chaser.
Yeah, well, you literally were like, "Oh,
You
bro,
are
it
the
doesn't
king
matter who
clout
won because I
chaser.
get more
All you
clout."
care about
Bro,
is
it doesn't matter who said what. I get more
just
clout. You
play
know why
Zelda
you
on
get
your
more
stream
clout?
all day.
You know why you get more
If
clout
you
from
guys
talking with me
want-
than I
if
do with
actually
you?
care about
Because I'm a
revolution and
larger
socialism,
content
come
creator
follow
than
us
you.
at the Midwestern
Yep,
Marx Institute.
there it is.
You'll learn a lot from me.
Yep, figure. All these conversations go basically the same way. It was the same with Jackson Inkle. He doesn't actually believe anything. That's why every time he talked about any subject, he ran through like 4 or 5 talking points that's why I accused. The funny thing is, it's actually less embarrassing that he doesn't have a script next to him because it means he talks and thinks that way. It's like the coded pre-baked language of a propagandist or maybe like a TV host or something. No independent thought. I can't believe he had that Merkel article and he was like, yeah, this shows she said, yeah, this is a plan to invade Russia. And then it didn't mention Russia or NATO. And he was like, well, read between the lines. Look at how look what it says. And it says, I hope that Ukraine gets time to build up its forces. And he's like,
Jesus.
Ukraine. Clearly she meant NATO. Just truly psychotic stuff. But the only times that he stopped talking at the end there was when he was thinking what like train he was going to run on next. This is one of the, it's the type of person I don't generally like debating, but I did think it was particularly funny how for the first 9/10 of the conversation, he had no response to my like, oh, I'm just learning about this today, and it seems you have some problems with your argument, which is why I did that, by the way. There were people in chat who were like, dude, you should go hard. But like, as soon as you go hard with him, he just doesn't stop talking. And he's like, by the way, I get so much clout from this. I get so much attention from talking to you, which reflects on me somehow.
Oh my gosh.
You can't engage with people like that in that fashion. Because they
True.
don't actually care about anything. They're like empty. All right, well, that was pretty fun.
It was fun. And if you've enjoyed this,
there are some of them who actually believe the stuff they say, but he's not one of them.
so if you've enjoyed this,
That was the Socratic method. Yep.
press like, press subscribe, press the bell method, and then of course, consider supporting your favorite streamer. Let's go. Let's bam. And now I'm actually curious about that other thing. I like the stream. Come on, gigglers.